patient.
Yeah.
You're like,
You're up, Erin.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to open the Board of Health meeting this week. We have a couple of things on the agenda. We've got good attendance tonight. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. The first thing on our agenda is to review the proposed regulations. And the way that we can do this is we'll go through a process because there's a whole process that goes into this. It's not, we've done quite a bit of work leading up to what we have now as the proposed changes to our regulations, and then there'll be more process after this until they go final. So I think it's important for everybody to understand that it is in the midst of a process and not at the start and not at the finish right now. So Janet's going to lead us through what's gone on to date as far as posting and public announcements in this public meeting. And then I'll say a few words on that.
So once the board has made their numerous revisions and has settled on the copy that you folks have hopefully reviewed prior to tonight's meeting, we posted a legal notice of the public hearing in a newspaper both 7 days and 14 days prior to tonight's meeting. This is our chance for public input today and potentially future meetings if we don't hear out everybody tonight. Then we will continue the meeting till our next meeting. Once the board agrees on a final copy, those will get typed up in a formal format, and we'll send those to Town Council for review. When we hear back from Town Council, the board will sign the regulations at the next Board of Health meeting. At that point, the changes get attested at the town clerk. We put a legal notice listing the a summarization of all the specific changes into the newspaper again. And at that point, the regulations with all of the specific changes are sent to the DEP, both the Central Register and the Central Regional Office, and that completes the process for the new regulations.
Thanks. Any questions on that?
yes.
Yeah.
Has town council reviewed your current amendments?
I think
Right
we
now.
just,
No.
What you're proposing right now to
No.
vote on?
Do you want to go over it again, how that works?
Yep, so the town council will not see
Well,
them.
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying, has town council seen what you're proposing right now?
I don't know if they've seen it.
Before any vote had happened?
It has not been a final review. They aren't final yet, and they haven't done an official
So
review.
how is it that you're able to vote on something if town council
I-
hasn't
that's
seen
the-
it yet?
We just tried to go over a process, that's why I wanted to go over this first. So what we vote on, by the time we get to a final vote, I think town council looks at it before we vote, is that correct? Is that correct, Gina? Yeah, so this is not, what we're doing tonight, this is a listening session, so this is our open meeting. So what we're here to do is to listen and find out what people feel like they could do better, what they like about it, and then go forward from there. Part of the process is town council review. That has not happened yet.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, it's a good question because I think it's really, really important that people understand it's a process. And part of that process, just to let you know, we did review, we got some input from previous board members, and we took that into account. When they came in and talked to us, there were quite a few more revisions than there are now. And we've cut it back. Jim Gareffi has given us, our town health agent has given us comments, and we've integrated those, and that's listed on the posted proposed regulations. We've reviewed some of the regulations in nearby surrounding towns and checked in with the conservation agent. It has not gone to vote by Concom, so there are no official comments right now.
Aaron, question.
Yeah.
Are we working off the revision of 9/14, is that
Yes.
the latest?
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And that has a row in it. What that has in it is, it's got a row in the end, or column, that has Jim Greffy's comment, so that's the health agent, just for, so you know. So in order to do this, we need to have justification. And so posted along with our suggested regulatory changes is the justification. And we were going to do a justification for each regulation, but really they rolled up to an overall justification. So I'm going to read that now. In accordance with its authority under MGL Chapter 111, Section 31, and MGL Chapter 21A, Section 13 and 310 CMR 15.0033, and again, Town Council will review that as we are not lawyers. The Board of Health of the Town of Littleton enacts the following supplementary regulations. Here's the justification. Massachusetts state regulations provide minimum standards for disposal of sewage and drinking water wells. Specifically, Title V, 310 CMR 15 to 15.505 of the State Environmental Code sets minimum requirements for all towns in Massachusetts utilizing subsurface sanitary waste disposal systems. Recognizing that local conditions may require additional environmental and public health protections, the Commonwealth authorizes local boards of health to promulgate additional bylaws based on these local conditions. The Littleton Board of Health feels the long-term health interest in our town can only be served by adopting certain regulations which are stricter than the minimum Title V requirements. The local conditions considered by the board include. So what that is basically saying is Title V is the state law, and we have to abide by that. The local Board of Health has the authority to promulgate additional regulations given local conditions. And these are the local conditions that we cite. The majority of Littleton relies heavily on local groundwater supplies, unlike a number of Massachusetts towns covered by Title V. If a residence or business loses a well to pollution, it may be very difficult to find alternative sources or bring water in. Littleton geographically is in an area of extensive wetland, high water table, and ledge. Safeguards in the original septic system installations are necessary because alternative repair locations are often unavailable due to these limiting site conditions. Littleton presently has no municipal sewage to connect to in cases of septic system failure. Areas of Littleton adjacent to valued surface water resources are very densely developed. Additional protection of groundwater that discharges to the lakes is required. Any questions on the justification?
Will you be taking comments, or are you just taking questions?
Questions? Just so it's clear.
But you will be taking comments?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Ted Doucette, 152 Whitman Avenue. I'm looking at these, and I don't see anything that really calls Littleton out as being that different. We do have some challenging areas because of high water that you mentioned. But, Title V, even though it is the minimum standard, it was developed to protect all areas of the state in the regulations. And I don't see anything here that calls out Littleton as being exceptionally different from other towns. There's a lot of towns that have the same challenges. So what kind of research went in to find out that if Littleton was really that much different and required that? And one other question is, okay, it's more of a comment, so I can wait.
So these are conditions in Littleton which make our water resources vulnerable. And some of them, they are different than some of the other towns in Massachusetts, as it says here. Also, we did look at some of the adjoining towns, and they've promulgated more stringent regulations. Any other questions? Yeah.
So,
Oh, could you say your name,
my
please?
name, Doug Shaw, 10 Sleigh Red Lane. Did you guys have a third-party review help you with your process
No.
here? So, just the board has made these decisions without,
We did not have a third-party review.
okay. Wouldn't that be beneficial for the town and for the board?
Possibly.
We had Cheryl Sparrow come in.
That's true, we did have one.
We had Cheryl Sparrow from the Massachusetts Association of Boards come in and talk to us about these.
So we're gonna, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, was it Cheryl, what did you say?
Cheryl Sparrow?
Are her comments available as a public record?
Yeah, there, well, you can reach, it was a televised meeting, and we had meeting minutes.
Okay, because I just wanted, because you have a very well-organized chart here that has Jim Griffey's comments, but this, I'm sorry, I missed her last name, Cheryl. Her comments, would be helpful to us, as well, I would think. And I don't want to get off on the wrong foot here. I know it seems like I'm challenging and things like that.
Yeah.
And, I really want to set the tone as I'm not trying to be contentious. I don't think a lot of people are here being contentious. We have a lot of residents who have experience in this. Mr. Shaw's been building in town for several years. Peter Yap was on the board for 10 years and did a lot of research and work on this. You have other former board members. You have myself, a former board member, a professional engineer who's been in this industry for 15 years. We're not here to be contentious. I think we're here to be a sounding board and to be a resource for you, because we have a lot of the experience that maybe some of the board members don't have of, 50, 60 years of experience in various aspects of this. So I hope you'll, listen to us as input and feedback and not as contentious.
Okay, thank you. Let's just, all we're doing is taking questions on the justification. And then we've got letters we have to read. There are a few letters that came in. And then we're going to go through the regulations one by one. And for each one, this is a listening session, so everyone will have the opportunity to comment at that point. And at that point, you will be able to make specific comments on the regulations. So I would recommend that that's a good place to do it, because then you can make specific comments rather than overarching ones. Yeah, Peter?
One thing I would ask, I didn't hear what Mr. Baker's answer was. Apparently over that side they could hear.
Okay.
So if people are going to give a statement or something of that nature, can you make sure that everybody can hear them? I'd like to hear what he had to say again.
Okay.
We had Cheryl Sparrow from the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards come in and just give us a rundown of our responsibilities.
Thank
Kevin, can you pull the speaker closer to you, perhaps?
So at this point, we're going to read the comments that came in, the letters, and then we'll go down by the regulation and take comments from the room. So I figured we can each read one of these. Do you want to read the first one?
Sure.
I'm going to take this one.
Dear members of the Board of Health, I'm writing in response to the proposed regulation changes regarding septic systems. I fully support these changes. Thank you for...
Yeah.
Is this on?
That's on the amplifier, yeah, okay.
I'm writing in response to the proposed regulation changes regarding septic systems. I fully support these changes. Thank you for being forward-thinking and working to protect the best interests of the community as a whole and our precious natural resources. Too often, the larger picture is not considered due to self-interest of the very few who stand to profit. Thank you for your hard work on the issue. Regards, Katie Caruth, 58 Goldsmith Street.
And the next one is September 27th, 2018. Dear Board of Health, can you guys all hear me? This is a letter of appreciation for the work that you've done to re-examine and refine regulations for the standards of sewage and drinking water wells. The enhanced protections of our water is greatly appreciated. Since I moved to the town in 1998, I have been concerned with many of the changes and growth in the town. I appreciate the work your board has done to evaluate the water quality, current needs, and future demands of the town's residents and businesses, and I applaud the proposed changes as rational safeguards of our precious water supplies. Best regards, Janine Wood, 12 Christina Street.
And this is an email from Amy Green, who's our conservation agent. Again, it was not voted on by the full Conservation Commission. They didn't have time to do that. Regulation 6, suggestion, no soil absorption system for new construction shall be installed within 100 feet of a wetland. Determination of wetland limits must be made by a professional wetland scientist or through the Littleton Conservation Commission. by determination of applicability or abbreviated notice of resource area delineation. Do you know? You want to read that one?
Little's Board of Health, 41 Sherrick Street. Can you hear me? Littleton, Mass. Subject, regulation changes. Their Board of Health, I recently attended your meeting 7/24/18, for I had heard that there were proposals to bring the local regulation back to what they were prior to 2007. Starting in 2007, the board reviewed the existing regulation to see that was pertinent for the time period. Many regulations were rescinded and were changed. I was taken aback by what I saw at this meeting and had a discussion on open meeting violation and a couple of hearings that didn't go that well. Having served in the Board of Health, Conservation Commission, AG Commissioner, and several study groups, I don't like to criticize board members, but in the case something needs to be done, I know most of the present board members have had very little experience and it showed. I was fortunate when I went on to have had very experienced board member to teach me and still took 2 years to learn the ropes. I can't conceive of anybody with a few months' experience wanting to rewrite regulation they don't even understand. It is like a student wanting to change driving law. The Title V has been around for over 30 years and has been periodically updated. Local boards could make the regulation more stringent, and that did. Littleton had a 3-member board that wrote those old regulations many years ago. Peter Casaneri, who had served with me and I had almost 50 years of experience, was an author of most of those old regulations. In 2007, he voted along with the rest of us to get rid of many of those old regulations. This is what this present board wants to bring back. Why? The locals, forgive me, I can interpret it into 5 different languages this particular word, scooterbutt, say that certain board member want to stop growth what is not their job. Can this present board cite any cases of this present regulation causing an environmental problem? No. So why are you changing them? What is your background and gives you the experience to evaluate whether or not these changes are necessary? What will be the effect on that local homeowner? Let's look at what the effect will be. More requests for variances, resulting in more work on the Neshoba Board of Health. Later meeting hours for Littleton Board of Health. More work for the staff. Slower turnaround the permit. Greater experience for the homeowner, etc. Have you ever discussed this with a professional or thought about it? In conclusion, you need to learn your job before you go through any wholesale changes. If this is one many show, the other member need to step up and stop it. I tried. It will add that many past board members probably will be sitting with you folks to answer questions, to provide guidance if asked them. The gentleman that wrote this is a friend of mine, Peter Yap.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Dear Board of Health, I have reviewed the proposed subsurface disposal regulation changes and wanted to share my thoughts. I knew prior regulations had been repealed, but was surprised to see the extent. As an environmental geologist with an educational background and professional focus on hydrogeology and fate and transport of contaminants in the environment and protection of our water resources, this issue is important to me. I appreciate your efforts to protect the water resources of Littleton. I spoke with 2 of Mass DEP's Title V regulators to get a better understanding of how state-level Title V regulations handle holistic watershed protection, especially in areas with a high density of septic systems. I learned, and I'm sure you know, that the state Title V regulation strategy is on a site-by-site basis, and that the protection is handled through setbacks to standard sensitive receptors. Example, Zone 1 and 2 aquifers and wetlands. Further, the Mass DEP stated that they rely on local boards of health to put forth additional local regulations to holistically protect resources, with the acknowledgement that local variations in development density and sensitive resources, among other considerations, are better addressed on a local level. As I am sure you are aware, septic systems are not perfect wastewater disposal systems. They do not remove 100% of the pollutants associated with residential wastewater. The U.S. Congress Office of Technology Assessment, OTA, stated that major factors affecting the potential of septic systems to contaminate groundwater in general are the density of systems per unit area and the hydrogeological conditions. Areas with a density of more than 40 systems per square mile, 1 unit per 16 acres, are considered regions with potential for contamination. OTA 1984. Septic systems rely on dilution potential of the groundwater system. Since septic discharges are just below the land surface, the top portions of the aquifer begin mixing with the discharge first. As groundwater moves down gradient, the discharge from the septic system disperses vertically and mixes to increase aquifer depths. The discharge from one septic system also mixes with the discharge from other septic systems located downstream, HAL 2016. Because of the additive effect of septic system discharges on groundwater, new development upgradient of existing septic systems in neighborhoods adjacent to our lakes and/or in areas where groundwater quality is heavily impacted should be subject to more stringent limitations, such as the increased setbacks and reserve areas as proposed. An increased treatment technology to prevent further degradation to the environment. In September, I attended the presentation of a pre-notice of intent, NOI, status update for our municipal separate storm sewer system, MS4, permit. This effort by Ty and Bond is in conjunction with the Water Department and DPW has mapped out surface water bodies and storm water infrastructure in Littleton. 3 of our 5 lakes on the Clean Water Act Section 303D list of impaired water bodies, including Long Lake and Spectacle Pond. Waterways such as Beaver Brook are also listed as impaired. The impairments include issues that result, at least in part, from septic systems. Issues identified include low dissolved oxygen, organic enrichment, nutrient loading, and the presence of pathogens, for example, E. coli, among others. To comply with our MS4 permit, the town will need to expend money and commit labor to implementation of best management practices, BMPs, to address these impairments. These impairments to our surface water bodies also need to be addressed through tighter septic regulations for new construction. I am aware that Littleton residents are already faced with very high septic replacement costs, technology, engineering, and permitting in some areas due to initial placement too close to water resources, and appreciate that the proposed regulations do not intend to place additional hardships or barriers to the replacement/upgrades of systems at existing homes. By requiring more stringent initial placement characteristics for developers, my hope is that homeowners would be saved a major project for future upgrade/replacement. In addition, we will be voting at town meeting on October 29th to fund a $2.2 million, the continuation of engineering services for a proposed sewer system at the Common. Construction costs projected to be in excess of $20 million, and at least $500,000 has been spent due to impacts from septic systems on the groundwater in the area. I am in support of the proposed reinstatement of subsurface disposal regulations and other changes that have been proposed, and would encourage the Board of Health to further look into septic densities and ways to further reduce the degradation of our groundwater and surface water quality by septic systems. Impacts to the environment from septic systems is costing Littleton taxpayers money, and the town should act in its own best interest to save money and protect our environment. Thank you for your time and work. Sincerely, Julie Rupp, New Estate Road. She has as references Hanson, Allen, and Luce Engineers, HAL 2016, Toll County Septic System Density Study, and OTA, U.S. Congress Office of Technology Assessment 1984, Protecting the Nation's Groundwater from Contamination, Volume 2, OTA 276, Washington, D.C.
Thank you. So, in that letter, yeah, Julie gave us a nice overview of, a researched overview of some of the reasons why groundwater protection and maybe some additional restrictions on new development, septic systems and variances for new development are a good idea. And I just want to make a point, because I know that, when Peter wrote his letter, that it was in an older version of the regulations, and we've gone back and made sure it was clear. This doesn't, I don't think it affects upgrades at all. There's one part that affects some upgrades, but it's just specifying the retaining wall. But this is really meant to target new construction.
When do we get
So
a
not-
chance to voice our opinions about, you keep talking about new construction, how it's not affecting.
You're speaking out of turn,
No,
I'm
I'm just
sorry.
asking
I
what part.
already went over that.
Yeah.
I said that we were going to go through this one by one, and then people can come up and comment.
No, well, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, you guys are reading everybody's letters from outside the thing, but when do we get a chance?
I just told you that. It's process, and we're going to go through either one. People who wrote letters, we have to read them into the record.
Can't you just enter them in the record, we can read them at our will?
No, why are you, no. I've been told by the town clerk that they need to be read into the record, so they were.
That's when the town council told you to do that, so.
Yeah, continue. Go ahead, continue.
So we're going to go through each regulation. Would you start, Kevin, on the first one?
Sure.
Regulation 23.
So regulation 3,
Oh, yeah, I'm
the
sorry.
reserve area.
I have-
So the proposed updated local regulation number 3 is that the reserve area must be at least 10 feet away from the primary leaching area. The area between the galleries, chambers, and trenches may not be used for part or all of the reserve area. The reserve area shall be accessible by gravity flow if the primary system is gravity fed. A reserve area must be shown for upgrades if feasible.
So if you have any comments on this, you can come up to the microphone, state your name and your address. And Jim Greffy's comment is, in general, I believe having separate areas for primary and reserve is a good thing from a construction standpoint. I couldn't speak to the value of the 10-foot offset.
My name is Sean Keenan, I live at 54 Gristmill Road. I also own a house at 6 Charles Street. I also own one at 7 Laurie Lane, 9 Laurie Lane, and 44 Bruce Street. My problem with that thing is you can't look at it as a single. What's the difference between 10-foot offset and everything? My question to you is, what happens to all the small lots that 70-year-old people have been saving for 100 years, and they want to cash them in for their retirement? Under these new rules, you've got over 100 lots down by the lake that are going to be unbuildable. What happens to those people that have been saving and mowing the grass and taking care of it and picking up the leaves, and now they want to sell one to a builder, to whoever? Maybe they want to build one for their kid on this lot. What happens to that 140 by 100 lot that this guy's been saving for 40 years or 50 years? Your regulations now are going to wipe it out. What do you tell the guy when you literally take $200,000 out of the guy's pocket with these regulations? When they can build it now, but in 6 months they can't build it. Have you guys thought
Are
of
you talking
that?
about new construction, Sean?
New construction.
In a lot that's been vacant and being held to build on at some point? Or are you talking about?
Lisa, I like you very much. I like you very much.
We're just
So
asking
if
questions.
you want to
We're
go,
not
if you want to go down it, I'll say,
I'm
I
just-
built your house 2 years ago on a lot that breaks 4 of those rules. You have walls, you have barriers, you have reserve trenches in between, you have wetlands at the back.
And I
Your
looked
house
at
lot
this-
could not be built under these new regulations. Now, the $58,000 that was originally paid for that lot went to some little old lady, Mrs. Smith. What are you going to tell those people that don't have that money anymore, that income? The people that have saved. There's hundreds of people in Littleton that you guys are punishing, and it isn't the builders. Big deal. We'll move on. We'll get another one. But what about the people that own these lots for all these years and taking care of them? And you can see them all up and down Goldsmith.
So that's what we're here to talk about, too.
Well, it doesn't seem like you guys took any of that into consideration
Well,
by putting those 4 regulations back to
But
to
we're
ancient
looking for your
prehistoric
input
days.
now, too, you know, so.
My input is, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, Lisa. I know your experience is very little, but
Exactly.
you live in a house that breaks all these rules, okay? And I can go on and on. Mr. and Mrs. Levine on the corner of Fletcher, Lincoln Drive. There's a million houses that we've done where the people have been able to have retirement money and buy a new car and go visit their kids in Florida because they saved these lots for a long time. And you guys are punishing these people. You're literally like bank robbers robbing their retirement funds.
Could I answer? You gave a response, but you asked a question. They weren't, the regulations have changed, so they weren't able to do it in the past. And there was a rationale for that, as there is with any kind of regulation, especially environmental regulation. So that's the answer to that.
So you're okay by taking these people's
I am
land
not
and
taking-
tell them that they cannot build on
Not
it?
taking,
You're taking their land.
Okay.
You're physically reaching into their pocket and telling them they can't have any money for it. But they've been paying taxes on these lots for years and years to the town. Are you gonna give them back all that money when you tell them the lots are no good?
We're gonna ignore you.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Good evening. Ted Doucette, 152 Whitcomb Avenue, professional engineer who also practices in town, and just for full disclosure, I have about three or four projects going in town right now. You know, going back to your justification here, you talk about all the, you know, that you want to enact these regulations to protect the groundwater resources and issues in town, things like that. So I know you said you weren't going to go through them at one by one, but I think there needs to be some justification or some explanation of how these regulations will further protect groundwater resources in the town. By making a reserve area 10 feet away from the primary reserve area, all you're doing is you're taking up more land, and you're requiring the area to be set aside to be greater, which may affect the ability to build on a lot at all. The area between galleries, chambers, and trenches may not be used for the part of the reserve area, and this is obviously taken away from Title V. I'd like to know how that protects groundwater resource, because groundwater is treated by the interface of the soil and the water in a septic system. So by making these things further apart doesn't increase the treatment, it doesn't increase the separation of groundwater, it doesn't, in my opinion, affect the treatment of water, and therefore does not improve the groundwater, the protections of the groundwater. The reserve area shall be accessible from gravity flow of the primary system if the primary system is gravity fed. This was something, I remember this one when I first got involved in this, when I moved to town. I had been practicing engineering for about 6 years, or 6 or 7 years, and I had been in the septic industry for maybe 1 or 2, and I heard that Littleton was a difficult board to deal with because of all the regulations, and I didn't really like my town being known for that, and I really didn't want my neighbors being subjected to rules that didn't matter. And this one was something that was going to be thrown in, and I provided public comment on that way back in 2004, 2005, and it was taken out. I mean, this saying the reserve area shall be accessible by gravity flow if the primary system is gravity fed is something that is strictly being used to prevent houses from being developed. It provides no additional protection, and I'd really like to see a rationale to convince me otherwise. You know, and I appreciate Jim Griffey's comments. If he watches this I hope he understands that I have full respect for him. We work together a lot. We've spent hours out on the ground tossing ideas around, talking about septic systems, things like that. So I have nothing but the most respect for him as a regulator and someone who knows about septic systems. The thing that I call into question here is he's not a contractor. He's seen a lot more septic systems be built than I have. But I don't think he can, his comment about the constructability of a system should be held with a lot of weight in this manner. And I'd like to hear from the board, if not now, at some point, about how these provide additional protections. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, board members, Paul Glavy, 54 North State Road, speaking as a resident, not as a member of the Board of Selectmen. If you don't mind, there's like 5 areas actually that I'd like to address, either in comment form and or in some parts with a question. And the first question, I guess, in reviewing this and its history since it was introduced on June 26th to this board, is a question of where did this come from? I reviewed the minutes for the preceding 6 months of the board, and there was no prior discussion of issues popping up that needed to be addressed by regulatory changes. There was a series of the usual administrative functions, reviews of permit applications, etc., but there was not one mention over the 6 preceding months that a comprehensive and pretty significant overhaul of the Board of Health regulations was needed, called for, and would solve any identified problem. But nonetheless, that's what was dropped before the board on the 26th, and it apparently came about as a review of the entirety of the regs, but I find it hard to believe that these specific changes, which all conveniently reverse reforms that were made over a decade's period of time by a number of Board of Health members who put a lot of time in and had qualifications and a lot of input before they made changes over the years. People that spoke like Ted Doucette, Peter Yap, Bob Zimmerman, who's not here tonight. But that really got the Littleton Board of Health out of a bad period where we were known for a Board of Health that adopted regulations on the fly without any process, most of which would not be supported legally in court, and a lot of cleanup was required to bring the Board of Health's regulatory standards up to that of which the town of Littleton's other boards and commissions strive for. And I think we've been in a good place for a while with regard to that. So I wonder where that is even coming from. And I don't know if there's any comment there. Why all of a sudden on June 26th? I mean, it's the second meeting you had after the election that, boom, all of a sudden there's, without any prior notice, a lot of significant and specific regulatory changes proposed.
Well, I was on the previous board, and we did change membership, and there's a difference in opinion on the present board and the last one, and I actually did bring up things as here and there along the way,
Well,
different meetings.
Your minutes for the 6 months prior to this June 26th meeting don't reflect any of that, and there was only one change on the board during that time period.
Well, I did bring up the issues with water quality and wetlands and environmental protection, but that board didn't think that that board did not believe that environmental protection was part of what the Board of Health was supposed to do. When actually,
I don't think that's a fair characterization. I'm sure the members of that board wouldn't consider that either.
You didn't let me finish my sentence.
Okay.
I was told that environmental wasn't part of that. It was strictly public health. Now, not everybody on the board. You asked the question. I'm trying to answer it. I can not answer it if you'd like.
Continue to answer as you see fit.
So there was that. And also, I think just in the community, there's been a lot of displeasure, and maybe that's why there's new board members in that the building in town, the overbuilding on smaller lots, especially down by the lake. And this.
So you're admitting on the record that a motivation for this is to address building?
No.
Because that's not defensible, as you know, under state law.
Could I finish?
I'm glad that, well, I just wanted to make sure, give you a chance to back out of that statement if you
I'm
wanted to.
not backing out of it. I'd like to
Good.
finish what I'm saying. There's a big difference between that. building and having septic systems, you just heard a letter that was researched about the density of septic systems and the impacts on water quality. So it's the density of the septic systems, because that's what the Board of Health deals with.
Okay.
Does that make you feel better about that?
Well, it does make me feel better. I'm glad that you acknowledge that the motivation, at least in part, was to address building
No,
and
the
public sentiment
motivation-
about that, which is not the legal purview
motivation-
of the Board of Health. And
The motivation
Yeah, I
was
mean,
the
can I finish when I make a
density
statement?
of well, you said something that I didn't say. Density of septic systems.
well, you said the building in town, too. I think that's on record. Anyway, you also cite in the justifications on several of these protection of the public water supply. Has the Board of Water Commissioners weighed in on this? Have they asked for assistance on this? Have they voted on it? Have you sought their opinion on this? They're the folks that are specifically charged by the voters and by law with protecting the public water supply. Historically, in the good days, the Water Commissioners and the Board of Health worked together. And in fact, that was the case that generated the, what is now a proposal coming before the October 29th town meeting for the sewer system, which initially came from joint efforts of both the Board of Health and Water Commissions. I notice you cite as well that we don't presently have a septic system, but you're obviously aware that we're attempting to do just that. So if that's one of the failings that would prompt consideration of these regulatory reversals, then I hope that at least you could wait to see if that occurs or not.
Can I comment on that? That's only going to serve a small portion of town.
I'm not sure in your research as well that you would recognize that the four items that you cite here under your justifications look remarkably similar to the legal case that the town of Littleton's attorneys had to make in defending the Board of Health years ago when the owner-developer, Bumblebee Lane, John Dunn, took the town to court over some of these exact regulations. And this looks a lot like what the town's argument was in court. And we lost. And the town had to react to that, both in paying for legal fees, putting the town and the longtime resident who owned the property through a necessary burden of going through court and the expenses involved with that. So I hope that you would reconsider whether or not those justifications would serve as a standing legal defense in court. And then finally, if indeed you are trying, admittedly or otherwise, to use these regulatory changes as a means to prevent growth, I'll just report on the record, since it's on the record anyways, that as a representative of a family trust that owns 43 acres, we reluctantly filed an A&R last week to preserve our rights under the current regulations. So if the attempt was to prevent development, sadly, you have caused a significant backfire, and you're actually causing development. But so in our case, I guess we're protected, but I'm concerned, frankly, for the other residents in town so that they may not have to suffer through these regulatory changes that are unnecessary and, I would say, ill-founded. Thank you.
So do we have anything specific on Regulation 3?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
I'll be as specific as the previous speakers were. So I do want to say, as a previous member of the Board of Health, I do remember having discussions with you that it wasn't wetlands protection that was the purview of the Board of Health. At least when I was there, and perhaps it was a different conversation, nobody ever said it wasn't the environment. Environmental health wasn't the purview of the Board of Health. Wetlands protection is the purview of the Conservation Commission.
Yep.
That was made clear to you, I believe, a couple times by me. So I do want to say that I've done a lot of wetlands work all over the state. A lot to do with nutrients, a lot to do with agricultural chemicals, and I found your initial justification that you went through to be very weak and generic. In my experience, probably 75% of the towns in this Commonwealth meet the definition or the description you gave of Littleton. Surface water, groundwater, ledge. I drove down to Duxbury. Every town between here and there meets that definition, but most of them don't have any regs anywhere near this part. So, and let's be honest, this is going to cost people a lot of money, as this gentleman pointed out. It's going to preclude people from developing land they paid taxes for. One question I've had, you've met the bare minimum, you've posted the notice of this meeting, you've got contractors, former boards of health members, selectmen, realtors. you don't have the little old ladies who've been sitting on this lot for a long time.
Because they don't know about it.
Exactly. So, and while I'm not saying you haven't met the bare minimum, that's all you've done. This regulation is going to impact a lot of people. And I would very, very, very strongly suggest that you make the extra effort to go out to the people of Littleton. We have a couple websites, Citizens for a Better Littleton, and really let this be known before you take it into a vote. Because people are really impacted aren't the ones here today. I've got a septic system. He's going to move on to he's going to do a bigger development in the next town over. Everybody here already has a septic system. But there's a lot of people who are impacted who don't even know about this, and they're the ones who are going to be impacted. I think you need to make the extra effort. Do you have to legally? No. Should you? Yes.
Well, we did try to. It should have been posted on that.
I know, but what little old lady that's had a lot for 40 years reads the newspaper, line 3, bottom of page 6, and
Yeah.
sees that if I don't come to this meeting, I'm going to lose the right to sell my piece of land in the future.
I mean, I get a reverse 911 call every time somebody sees a bear. I think you could probably do this with the folks down by the lake, because those are the ones who are really impacted by
Yeah,
this. You know it, and we do.
That upsets me because I really tried to,
And I don't think you did enough, judging by the people here today.
yeah.
And you can always do more, and I think you need to do more in this, because these are major changes, a lot of impact on a lot of people. As far as Cheryl Tabar, I've worked with her. Somebody asked if there's a third-party review. Cheryl's a tobacco control specialist. She's a public health attorney. She admittedly will tell you she knows nothing about Title V. She can tell you what your authority is and all that stuff, but that wasn't really a third-party review. And again, I would echo what the previous speaker said. Where's the water department in all this? Do they see a need for this? But your justification for this was generic. 70% of the towns in this state meet that definition. Very few of them have the kind of regs here. And you point to the adjoining towns, that probably has to do with more around socioeconomic stuff and frankly trying to prevent development, which I suspect is an undertone here. You know, there's a way you can protect development. If you think it's too dense down by the lake, that's a floor area ratio thing that can be done through zoning. It's not the Board of Health's purview. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
Rob Hart, 7 Barron Way. I am also president of Spectacle Pond Association, and in front of me is a letter. It's not exactly what we're talking about tonight, but I just want to reference something that may be useful here. We are writing a letter of support for the Stony Brook Watershed Flow Restoration Project. What I'm referencing here is just the number of partners on this one very small project affecting Spectacle Pond and Forge Pond in the town of Westford as well. So our partners in this are Mass DEP, the company Geosyntec, the Littleton Water Department, the Westford Water Department, the Westford Healthy Lakes and Ponds Collaboration, the Forge Pond Associations, and that's just an indicator of how complex these issues are. We're talking about a system, and that system impacts lots of people in various ways. If you want to look at the health of this town, look to the lakes. The Clean Lakes Association, very much tied in with the Littleton Water Department, has been working for a dozen or so years, and we have focused on keeping the lakes healthy. But if you look around, you see Mill Pond's a mess, and there is going to be a major restoration there. We're certainly treating Spectacle Pond, the pond I'm most familiar with. I believe Long Lake and Forge are also getting treatment for invasive species. There's a lot of monitoring that has to go on to figure out, are we doing the right things? So some of these problems are obvious. You just look at Mill Pond and you could say, we have a problem. Some of them are less obvious. Therefore, more monitoring is required. What I'm getting to is there are costs that we're not really talking about. The money we'll get from DEP, assuming they support this, is some of it what the town is putting in. We continue to mount costs that we're really not talking about. We need to pay attention to those costs as well as the other. I also have concern for the homeowners, absolutely, since I am one. And I live in a sensitive area. The other thing I would point out is that we are now into a period of high-density housing. It just means we need stronger protections to be very careful as we go into this new era of lots more housing in Littleton. So I support this. Our whole hope of this is creating a better habitat, which includes the fisheries, the recreational opportunities. In essence, we're talking about the quality of life of Littleton. So thank you for doing your work, and good night.
Thank you. Should we go on to the next regulation? All right. I'll read that.
Okay, so the next one, Regulation 5, percolation testing. The required percolation rates for new construction are as follows. A maximum percolation rate allowed for on any lot of 30 minutes per inch. A rate slower than this will be considered a failed percolation rate. B, the leaching area shall not be located closer than 25 feet from the location with the failing percolation rate until a passing percolation rate has been proven between the leaching area and the failing percolation test site. C, sewage systems shall be constructed in fill, must be designed according to the percolation rate of the underlying original soil. D, a new percolation test may be required where physical changes have occurred that may impact the percolation rate since prior testing. And E, sieve analysis or gradation testing shall not be allowed to determine percolation rates for new construction.
Yeah.
Chuck DeClose, 609 Newtown Road. I don't necessarily have a question. I do have a question, not necessarily an opinion. Can you define what percolation rate is?
Yeah.
For those of us that...
Yeah, so the percolation rate is if water can percolate through the overlying soils, and it has to, like if you have, what this is getting at are tight soils, and they do have to put fill on top of it, but what the point here is not to place a septic system on a lot where the soils are too tight. And so that's what percolation rate, does that explain it? It's how a liquid percolates through a material.
I'd like them to give me a shot at it, because they're the ones that are...
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right, point taken.
So if it's tight, then it doesn't the fluid doesn't percolate through it.
Okay, so what is the impact of this proposed change versus where we're at right now?
Yeah. You want to speak to that one?
So where we're at right now is that lots over 30,000 square feet, a 40-minute an inch perk rate is allowable. That's what the reg says today. And this basically just puts it 30 minutes an inch across the board for all lots.
So 40 minutes per inch means it takes 40 minutes to go an inch, and 30 minutes is 30 minutes to go an inch. So the 30 minutes per inch perks better than the 40. It's not as tight. So you have better drainage, basically. So that if you have a septic system and the wastewater is flowing into the groundwater, it actually can move with the groundwater's moving, and it can perk into the groundwater.
Is a 2-minute perk rate really good?
So what
Yeah.
is the state, what is the state doing?
I thought that makes it go too faster, so you don't want to go too fast. That's too good.
It's too
So
good.
you don't want to be too good, but you can't be too bad either.
What is the state doing right now?
State calls 60 minutes impervious.
So why are we doing the 30? We're already at 40, which is,
Well, it's at 30 for lots smaller than 30,000 square feet,
we're not even on the 30 across the board.
just to make
You're
it.
wiping out 1 acre lots that could potentially be built on it, because they could go to 40.
That's correct. I just have one quick thing.
But if
What's
you-
a tight soil? What's a tight soil?
A tight soil is soil that fluid doesn't run through. It has a low hydraulic conductivity, whether it's
So is sand a
vertical or
tight soil?
horizontal. No.
Rock.
Like clay.
Clay,
Clay.
clay.
All right.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Clay.
Clay, tight silts.
Just as a follow-up, just to
Yeah.
try to understand.
Yeah, yeah.
The full recommendation. I have the sieve analysis shall not be allowed to
Yeah.
determine percolation rates. Justification.
Yeah,
So what is a sieve analysis, what is a sieve analysis?
So if you
Why
get
would
to
we-
a
why
lot
would we
and
go
it
from having
doesn't-
it now to not allowing it?
yeah, if you get to a lot and the water table is too high so that you can't do a perk test, you can take the soil and look at how, if it's coarse or if it's tight. But basically, you've got a lot that has a high water table. So that's getting at trying to not develop new lots where the water table is high. So it's actually getting at overall drainage, and we get a lot of abutters in here to the Board of Health who have issues because of drainage, overland flow, and the septic systems going in. And the other thing is, if you look at climate change and changing water tables, then you could have, if you've got a a tight soil with poor drainage, then that could get worse as water tables come up.
What's it have to do with climate change?
Do you want to, why don't we let Mr. Doucette, are you done, Mr.
I
DeCosta?
still don't know what sieve analysis is.
Huh?
I still don't know what sieve analysis is. So there's a
Sieve
high water
analysis is
table.
when you take the material and you actually put it through sieves of different grades, so that the openings are different. They're large and then they're small. And so you're figuring out, if you take a chunk of soil, how much fines you have and how much of the coarser material you have. And if you have more coarse material, then it's thought to drain better.
So that
It's a
is-
test to see how quickly fluid moves through soil.
Well, wait a minute. Can I answer? Okay.
go ahead.
Your explanation of the test is fairly accurate.
Yeah.
But the end result is that you're determining what type of soil it is.
Yeah.
Soil, Title V has 4 different classes of soil. Once you get this done, you can then get that classification, and that's how you get your estimated percolation rate and your application rate to the ground. So that's getting you to where I think you wanted to be.
Yeah, but the thing
yeah.
is that with, I'd like to hear some input on E, actually.
I'm ready to
The-
go.
Yeah, with, what's happening is you're taking the soil and you're testing the soil, but on the lot itself, it's already saturated. So it's not going to, perk, per se. It's kind of a,
So if I dig up my swamp and I test the swamp, and I can make the swamp percolate, I can build there?
yeah. No, you can't.
Well,
But
if
that's,
it'll pass your
that's,
I
you
think
have to
I-
go to CAS, right?
Okay.
I think the
So-
sieve is more of a tool to be used when the percolation rate is close to the 30. It's a more accurate test for the soil engineers.
But what
I wouldn't
happens
s-
is
I wouldn't
people come in
support
with a
that.
high water table, and so they,
Wait a minute.
it's too wet to perk.
I can put this
So
to bed.
then they do the sieve.
I can put this to bed right now, because sieve test, that regulation is actually redundant to Title V, so it's actually doing nothing. There is a alternative to percolation testing policy that describes the sieve portion, and that is for upgrades and repairs only. So this is actually, one of my comments is that E is actually redundant and is not even needed. Now, when we talk about percolation rate, so if you have a tight soil or you have a loose soil that's perking, the application rate, so the amount of water that you can add to the ground in order to be treated and infiltrate into the ground is changed. So if you have a 2-minute per inch soil, a 5-minute per inch soil, you're going to have a small system. If you have a 30-minute per inch soil, the system gets bigger. If you get to a 60-minute per inch soil, the system gets even bigger. And that is so that you can have the same amount of treatment regardless of the percolation rate. So restricting you to 30 does nothing to protect the groundwater, because the protection's already built in. You get a 45-minute per perk, it gets bigger. You get to a 50-minute perk, it gets bigger. 60-minute, that's the biggest you're going to have. So the maximum percolation rate, all it does is stops that house that might have a 31-minute perk rate or greater from not being built. Now, it doesn't also only stop new houses. This stops increases in flow. So for the people who have a lot and they want to bring an in-law apartment in and have an in-law or anybody, all right, elderly person, or anyway, come in, and that's going to add a bedroom and it's going to increase the flow, and they say, oh, your perk rate was 31 minutes per inch, you're now in new construction, you can't build this, sorry, grandma's got to find another place to live, or the whole family does. So that's what that might be an unintended consequence of your regulation, and I would like you to consider that. A leach area not located closer than 25 feet from the location of family perk test until a passing perk rate has been proven between leaching areas and failed tests. This has been on here, I believe, for a while. It's not unreasonable. I don't really have a problem with that. Sewage systems be constructed and fill must be designed according to the percolation rate of the underlying soil. Again, that's redundant to Title V, and that's required. That's already required. So that it's already required by Title V. So Part C is not required. A new percolation test may be required where physical changes have occurred. Part D here. That's not likely, but it's not unreasonable. You'd have to have some pretty serious chewing up of the land in order to change that. But I would like to have you consider, does A actually provide additional protections to the groundwater and to the goals that you state in the beginning of the your
Okay.
document here? Thank you.
question?
I don't think so. He wants us to consider it.
I got the feeling that it was input, it wasn't. I got the feeling this was input, so
Yeah.
any questions weren't going to be answered. And I can ask any question.
Peter Yap, 415 Newtown Road, in case anybody didn't know where I live. In response to Chuck, I wanted to, and forgot my throat here, new construction. They always say, oh, it's new construction, it's going to stop houses, they're looking at new houses, but it doesn't. Like Ted was explaining, if you change room count of bedroom counts in that thing, you fall into new construction, and all the rules for new construction apply. Like he was saying, if you had an in-law that you wanted to move in and had to add to the house, you'd be caught in it, probably couldn't do it. But one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit, because I was in on the original change from 30 minutes to 40 on a bigger square footage area. In my particular case, I have 16 acres, and we wanted to have, one of my sons wanted to build on it, so I was going to deed him 4 acres. And the best perk rate we could get was 31. It was a no-go. Couldn't move in, even though he was going to have 4 acres, you couldn't do it. So that's why we originally went to 40 on 30 square feet and over, 30,000 square feet.
Okay.
That's the reason we did that, is because now you're looking at larger properties, like people were saying, the building acre and so forth. Also, when we did that, I checked around to almost every single other town to see what they did. What was their percolation rates? What were their regulations? And we looked at all of them, Bolton, Berlin, Harvard, and very few of them were even doing a 30 per inch. So consequently, they were all went to the state level of 60. Just recently, I did call around again, and almost all the towns, same thing, all up to the 60 minutes per inch. So I would hope that you would look into that a little bit better. I think the 30 per inch for the lake area is one thing we had in mind, and we didn't go to the 60, but anything over 30,000 square feet is just nuts to say, oh, you can't build on that. You got to be 30. It just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thanks. I think some of them, and we'll go back and look at it, but some of the other towns do have, they don't have the 60, they have restrictions, but they do it the way you're talking about, where they link it with size or certain circumstances. So we'll take another look at that.
Well, it's not according to this.
According to the proposed reg?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we appreciate your input on that. We'll take another look at it. Thanks.
Chase Gervig, 1 Oak Ridge Road. I have a comment on this one, not on the previous one, but there are elements of this that I think are protective of our environmental resources. And so to the extent that regulation 5, 6, 9, and probably a couple of other ones do come to bear on our actual environmental resources, as opposed to subtleties of septic system construction, which I wouldn't say I'm qualified to comment on. I appreciate that you guys are considering these and looking at these, because although there are certainly folks, let's take the lake, for example, down by the lake who may own a small parcel that they want to develop, there are also a huge number of folks around the lake who utilize the lake as a resource. And so if we shift all of our focus solely to the folks who want to build down there without considering the collective impacts to everyone else who utilizes those resources, then we've really misweighted this equation. I mean, as it is now, Long Lake is closed periodically during the summer due to E. coli loading. And the sole reason for that is going to be septic systems. And so putting more stringent regulations in place to ensure that new construction down there does not bring negative impacts to those water resources is, I think, consistent with what your overall goal is here. To the extent that there are elements within the proposed regulations that don't do that, I would ask you to take a strong look at how significant they are and where they actually matter, and focus on the elements that actually impact our environmental resources, rather than just put barriers in the way solely for the purpose of restricting development. But this is one regulation where at least components of it certainly have the potential to impact our environmental resources.
Thank you.
Can I address you just for a moment?
Sure.
When we talk about, somebody needs to be considered at the lake over another person, the person who, whatever Mr. Gerber said about, we need to consider the person who already has the house built versus the person who already has the lot unbuilt. I mean, how do we put one's property rights ahead of the other? Just because they built 50 years ago doesn't mean they have the right to stop, or the board or the town has the right to stop somebody out from building now. So, yes, we should look as a collective, but you can't stomp out one person's property rights just because they didn't build on that 50 years ago. And as far as E. coli in the lake, I cannot remember the last time it's closed. You guys have been on that okay, then I haven't been followed, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But, E. coli is not only a source, the only source is not septic systems. In fact, it's treated very well in the septic tank, and with all that areas around the lake, I mean, you could be getting E. coli from every squirrel, deer, bear, badger, whatever is out there,
Any
too.
mammal.
So, what's that?
Any mammal.
There you go, thank you.
So
Yes.
I think that the point was that the environmental protection, rather than, you brought it back to property rights. So the idea is environmental protection.
Right, so let's look at the environment. That's what I've been
Yeah.
pushing. I'm going to sound like a broken record. If it doesn't
Yeah.
protect the environment
That's
better than the other
consistent.
one,
Right.
then
Brad Mitchell, One Wilderness Road. Well, I would agree that septic systems undoubtedly do have an impact on Long Lake. You need to keep in mind that we have a lot of septic systems that are older still that don't comply with Title V. I mean, in my recent memory, and this is in the last 4 years, we have one where the septic system was a 55-gallon drum in the backyard. It just never came up to Title V. Those, I think, are the bigger contributors, not necessarily the new systems, the Presby, and the other things that are being put in. The other thing is, while they are undoubtedly a contributor, there's a lot of runoff that comes into that lake. Yard waste, geese, dog poop, that's a contributor as well. So it's not just the septic systems that are contributing to that problem.
We move on to 6. I'll read this one. No soil absorption system for new construction shall be installed within 100 feet of a wetland. Determination of wetland limits must be approved by the Littleton Conservation Agent or a certified wetland scientist. And then we have a letter, a suggestion from the Conservation Agent, again, not the Conservation Commission, to change this to determination of wetland limits must be made by a professional wetland scientist or through the Littleton Conservation Commission by a determination of applicability or abbreviated notice of resource area delineation. And also,
Does that mean that they?
just some backup on that. Let me just finish here. We did check Conservation Agent. I have an email here, sorry, can't find it. The Conservation Agent did check with Acton and I think it was Stowe, and they have this regulation, and this is not through the Conservation Commission, again, it wasn't voted on, but the Conservation Agent checked with, I think it was Acton and Stowe, and they haven't had any, they don't see this as problematic in their towns.
How many swimming areas does Acton have?
I'm sorry?
How many ponds does Acton have for swimming?
I don't know.
An hour apart, that's it, for them? We have how many? 3? 4? Fourth Pond, 1901 feet, same thing. Fourth Pond, Long Lake, Mill Pond. So there's a lot more lots that will fall into that 100-foot barrier in Littleton than there are in Acton or Stowe or any other.
And you bring up a great point that we need to protect those water resources.
Great point, we need to protect people's right for owning those lands and paying those taxes for all the years. That's a great point.
So, Sean Keenan again. So on this note, I'd like the board to go back and look at a recent A&R that I just filed this week on 44 Bruce Street. It's a almost 9-acre parcel of land. I have wetlands that are on the neighbor's property, not on that property, except for a little bubble that sticks out in the front and a little bubble of isolated, non-jurisdictional, how do you say it? Non-jurisdictional, isolated wetlands, not subject to, yeah, thank you, Mike. So if you take a look at this 8-acre parcel and you invoke this 100-foot rule, that 8-acre parcel cannot be built on, even though it's been farm field 7 acres of it for its entire life. So I would say, before you make that 100-foot, buffer zone, take a look at that one A&R, because how big are the pieces of land gonna have to be in this town in order to put a house on it if I can't fit one on a 9-acre lot? So look at the recent A&R, it was posted this week. It's terrible. If you put that 100 foot on the wetlands, you just wiped out 8 acres of land. So where is the little house is gonna go? And by the way, that's my house, and I'm keeping 6 acres for myself. So it's not like I'm trying to overdevelop the land. So under the old rules, I get my house. Under the new rules, no house. Where are we gonna put houses? Where are we gonna put growth?
Unless you get a variance.
So you're gonna ask people for new construction, you're gonna grant variances on new construction to go inside the 100? Because we don't grant them to go inside the 50 at all.
No.
So if you make that a 100-foot rule, they'll just take that as, we're not gonna grant you to go inside the 100. So just take a look at that A&R.
Okay.
Because it'll answer a lot of questions when you put a tape measure on it and go, oh my God, we just wiped out 8 acres.
I want to understand, you presently own 8 acres.
Correct.
And you want to build, you want to subdivide your land.
2 houses.
You want to, so you have an existing house. But you can't subdivide your land in such a way that you can't build a house that's 100 feet.
Not under this new rule.
But I don't understand why you can't build a house that's
Because the
not 100.
wetland is on the edge of the property, on Matheson's property. And if you take 100 feet and then put your septic system outside of that, on a 345-foot lot, it doesn't work.
Well, why don't you just divide the lots differently?
You can't. It's 300 feet long, narrow, 8 acres. You can't do it. That's what I'm saying. This 100-foot buffer wipes out an 8-acre parcel.
No, because you've already got a house on it.
Because I fell into the old rules, which we just filed an A&R for this week. But if I didn't file an A&R this week, and this goes at town meeting, what happens to my 8 acres?
You still have a house on it.
One house on 8 acres. So,
You're saying it's long and narrow.
yes.
Maybe that's all that
Maybe you
should
don't
be.
understand.
Maybe that's all that should be on that lot then.
Oh, yeah. 8 acres, one house. Good growth for the blue.
Ted Doucette, 152 Wickham Ave. There's a philosophy by some regulators. We used to have it in town before the regulation would change. It was in concern to the groundwater offset. It was required to be 4, Littleton required 5. So people were saying, hey, if 4 is good, 5 is better, right? Not really. I've done some research on my own from being on the Board of Health and trying to make arguments against Board of Health for things such as this. But regardless, the science shows that all the treatment that's going to occurs in the first 2 feet below the septic system. Okay, that doesn't mean all treatment's done. There's certain things like phosphorus that are going to perpetuate for a long time longer. But any treatment that occurs is going to occur in the first 2 feet. Now, that doesn't matter if it's next to a wetland, it's 100 feet from a wetland, or it's on top of Mount Washington. Okay, all that physics remains. So by changing the regulation from changing Title V, well, you can't change Title V, but making a local regulation that doubles the offset from wetland does nothing to protect the environment. Now, the Wetlands Protection Act says any work within 100 foot of a wetland needs to be regulated, reviewed by the Conservation Commission. That doesn't mean it needs to be done. There's performance standards that have to be met, obviously by the Conservation Commission. But this regulation does nothing to improve treatment, protect the environment. But offhandedly, I will say that it could affect the constructability of certain lots in town. Thank you.
Doug Shaw, what was your thought process in the 100-foot? I just can't grasp it. If COSCOM already says 50 foot is enough for no disturb, right? You guys are trying to make it 100 feet. I'm just not grasping why. What is your thought process behind
The
it?
minimum standard is 50 feet.
Yep.
And then 100 feet would add additional protection to water resources. And as we started out with, that's the intent here. The other thing is there, you know, if you look on the ground, there's one that was permitted through our board that's like on Newtown Road that's surrounded by water right now. So there's something wrong when we can permit something like that.
But did it hurt?
I wasn't involved in the
Did they need
permitting,
the-
but it was built,
the
and if you
buffers?
drive by it, it's surrounded by water.
But again, if it perked and it met the guidelines of the town at the time, then it's.
Well, that would say to me that the
perfectly fine.
guidelines need adjusting.
But that's one person's view.
That's true.
I don't. But
You have your view.
Still am not getting the 100 foot.
It's environmentally protective.
Why not 200 feet? Why not let's just stop everything and not, let's make it 500 feet so nobody can build anything, because that's where it seems like you guys are driving.
Again,
That's not
just
what-
take a look at the A&R that was
Thank
posted, it will really help you. Throw a tape measure on it, you'll go, oh my God, we really killed this whole piece of land.
So, you know, bachelor's degree, licensing, 20 years of experience. I don't feel that this provides environmental protection. You have just stated that it does. Could you indulge me and tell me why it provides better environmental protection? I think we're, you know, as town people who own property and land, I think we're, you know, we deserve that.
Okay. Well, the groundwater coming out of a septic system is just, I mean, the septic system is discharging to groundwater, and groundwater is going to be discharging to a wetland. That's the first thing. The second thing is that wetlands need to be protected in their own right, never mind just the groundwater. So by surrounding a wetland with, and which is what you do, with only a 50-foot buffer to discharge, then you're not being protective of the groundwater
Why
or
not?
the wetland.
Why not? And working within the 100
Well,
foot
why
is...
not just, why do we have any buffer then? Why not just stick it right next to the wetland?
Well, wetlands are valuable
Why don't we
resources, I
just
agree,
build
but that's
on the wetland?
conservation. Not allowing work within 100 feet is
No,
conservation.
we're just talking
it's
about
not-
septic systems
Okay,
here.
Okay, so but I stated that all the treatment that's going to occurs, whether
That's
you're,
what- that's-
whether...
That's
I mean,
what you stated.
Okay, that's what I stated from Bob Cypress at the University, at the Colorado School of Mines, who does this for a living.
Okay.
And
There's different, you're going to find different
do you have a
sources of
reference,
that.
or could you
I
provide?
do not have a reference off the top of my head. I know that there was, Julie referenced something.
Okay, so
We could put that
before
in.
we go forward, could you indulge me and let me know? So if you can tell me why it provides better protections, I'll jump on board.
Okay,
But
great. We'll get
I
that.
guess- Okay. But will the Board of Health provide me that information before you vote on these being final?
We're just listening session.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Cindy Napoli, Springfield Drive. I was just wondering if town councils had a chance to review these proposals?
No, we went over the process at the beginning. They don't review until we go through this process. That's just standard procedure. Okay.
Not news.
Excuse me?
So that's not news. It's
It was
gotta go
news to
in
me. That's why I said it was. Chuck DeCoste?
Chuck DeCoste, 609 Newtown Road. I caution you on making changes based upon one property on Newtown Road. I know exactly what property you're talking about. The culvert built.
That's not the only property, you know that. I didn't want to
You decided
bring,
a property, but
I know, and I
I
didn't want to bring it up,
caution
but
you.
I was challenged, so.
We shouldn't be making regulations for
Well,
one
maybe
or two properties.
not one property on Bruce Street either, so it's, there's different sides of the coin.
But that property on Bruce Street becomes a problem under this regulation, not under the existing regulation.
Correct.
Based on the research that I've heard tonight, property on Bruce Street, under the current regulations, is protected. And COMSCOM has their regulations in place to do just that. That's their charge. That's,
Yeah, we're not trying to regulate wetlands, we're just trying to regulate the buffer zone. Which, other boards of health do this. This isn't abnormal.
just a word of caution.
Just a follow-up comment, it might be worth having town council review this now, since there's so much involved.
That would be fine.
Debate this evening, as you
Yeah.
can see, we might be debating matters that aren't legally enforceable in some respects.
Anthony's here.
He's not town council. He doesn't.
So it
he
might
doesn't
be-
No,
authorize.
but he's the one that arranges town council review for us.
That's just my personal opinion, it might be worth him taking a look at it.
That's fine. Chuck, just to circle back, that property was permitted under the previous regulations, so again, it's the same thing.
We could point, to your point, we could point to a lot of properties that we scratch our head about.
Yeah.
For any number of things, whether it's too
Whether
close to a setback,
whether it's 50 or
regardless, not even-
100, there's going to be
I'm not even
properties to
talking
point
about
at.
environmental impact, we're talking about certain zoning issues or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
But there's always going to be.
There's always something.
One that we can point at.
Can we go on to the next one?
Just want to change the regulations.
You want to read 9? Gina? No.
Not really.
Louise?
You should put it from 100 to 50. Put it right now, because the DEP will give you the law to admit, and they change from 100 to 50. You see all these people here.
There are other people too who,
No, but it's
we've
not-
got letters
not
and there are
right.
people in the room who don't agree with that.
I know they can get a variance, but you gotta make sure.
Speak up so we can read.
What?
Yep.
Yes.
You want to speak up? Or do you want to just listen now and discuss it later at the next meeting?
I'm trying to keep quiet because there is something that I always disagree. I'm sorry that this new board, they are very nice people, but they decide to change the regulation when we already changed it several years ago. And the 100 feet, I agree with the gentleman, I'm sorry to say that. The question is, there is always a way to give,
Variance.
variance for 50 feet. But if we put it 50 feet, what we have against us as the regulation from the DEP and for the conservation. But there is, I always go, if somebody comes and say, look, we have wetland at 100 feet, and I'm building a house. We are, according, as a board, we says, you can't say no to the individual that's building a house because you're restricting from 50 to 100. We gotta give him 50 because he owns the land, he pays taxes, and if there's no damage to it, sometimes the leach field can be moved in a different direction. I mean, I've been doing construction for 36 years, and I'm sure these people here never even show a shovel or a brick or how to make mortar or a septic system. I put septic system. Sometimes it goes even below 50 feet. Because the law has to have, has to agree, the board has to agree for variance. I mean, I can't see, even though I don't like the guy there, but to me, he's a friend. If he said, Gene, I'm building a house, and look, I'm restricted, the law says 100 feet. So wait a minute, you have the house right there. If you have to rebuild it, sometimes unless you have not good ground and you have clay underneath, but that can be also solved. You take the clay out and put a new material. But these people here, I'm sorry to say, as much as I love them, you think they know that reversal can be done? No, because they never had a shovel in their hands. They never see a person digging a hole 7, 8, 10 feet down. That's why I'm trying to keep quiet, because I don't like what's going on.
Don't keep quiet, Gino, that's why we elected you.
No, but I feel because, like Peter's a friend. One day he says, Gino, we need you. I said, why? I don't know. I think we need you in the Board of Health. Because I work in construction. I had engineers fire. Would you believe that? My company said, Gino, what are you doing? I says, you make me boss? I fired the engineer. For 3 feet, they couldn't build something that was worth $20 million. I says, what the hell is wrong with you? We go in front of the authority and we ask for variance. We did that, and we had no problem. But here, they mean well. I mean, I gotta say, because the board is like a family. They mean well, but I like they knock their head off sometime. But they mean well. I love them. But the question is environmental. We have lake that they need a lot of work.
So Gino, thank you for sharing.
See, they cut me off
But
because I keep quiet.
I think we just need to stay on track and go through each of the regulations and hear what people say.
I lost my voice. Let somebody else read.
Okay.
I've been
Can you
reading
do
the whole
Regulation
thing.
9, Louise?
Regulation 9 is for shared systems. Shared systems will only be approved if each individual lot proposed to use such system can support a subsurface sewage disposal system which can meet the requirements of Title V and local regulations without a variance. The area proposed which could support a subsurface sewage disposal system on each lot shall not be used for any other purpose.
Do you have any comments? Basically, this is just making sure that each lot can support a system.
It's gonna,
Could you say your name and
my
your,
name's Michael Field, 95 Madawanaki Trail. It's gonna eliminate, open space subdivisions because they're just not gonna be able to have them developed when Title V already allows you to have 50% open space right now and use a shared system, which is better for the environment when it's a shared system to begin with, than individual lots, septic systems. It's gonna restrict open space subdivisions right now, if you change that rule.
Colby Field, 180 Ray Road. The development behind Cooper Farm would not have been able to be put in with the 100-foot offset to any of the septic systems if they had to show a septic on each lot. I know that's what's trying to happen here, but.
And now there's half of the open spaces used for the town now.
60% of the open space on that property was given to the town.
So I have a question. If
could you state your name?
Brad Mitchell, 1 Wilderness Road. So a shared system can meet the needs, waste needs of two houses, say 2. Why would you require both lots to be able to have their own separate system? If it's meeting the waste needs, aren't you protecting the groundwater and all those things you're supposed to be doing already? I don't quite understand the logic of requiring both lots to be able to have a shared one single system if the shared system will work. I don't see the benefit of that.
Kevin, you want to address that?
I think it's mainly due to the reserve area.
Didn't mention reserve area, anything I heard you say.
So if the system, the shared system was to fail, each unit could still have a septic system that would function.
Is that written in those regulations? The main purpose for this regulation?
But if the shared system's already designed, it already has a reserve area along with it.
Right, I mean, that shared system already has to meet that sewage flow, including the reserves and everything else in Title V. That would seem very arbitrary to then say, well, you really got both lots have that one system. Title V already ensures you get adequate reserves and an adequate system for those 2 buildings and the flow that comes out of them. So I don't see the logic in that unless it's really to prevent development, which you've said it isn't.
No, it's more that each home could have their own septic system
Forget
should
about
that septic
houses, what
system
about like
fail.
a condo development? You know, high-rise
Well, they come with
elevators,
it.
elderly, what about some, what about a 50-unit building? You gonna make 50 septic systems for 50 bedrooms? Doesn't really make sense.
It's just on one lot, right?
One shared system?
If I may. Ed Mullen, 10 Bristol Road.
Yep.
Would it also affect the accessory use bylaw, apartments built in the same house? Talking about a single structure, but still 2 separate dwellings. So are you saying that a 1-bedroom apartment built onto a 3-bedroom house, by right through our zoning, would or would not be regulated under this bylaw?
Yeah, I don't,
I think we've addressed that.
yeah.
Well, I'd like you to, because it sounds to me like you guys are trying to regulate zoning through Board of Health regulations, and I have a serious concern about that.
That's exactly right.
Oh, no, we're not, that,
Oh, I disagree.
That's the impact of what you're doing.
It's obvious.
Did you get an answer?
Make a suggestion. I think we should have the attorney.
yeah. Did, your question was, have we looked at it yet? And the answer was no. That answered your question, correct?
It answers the question.
Yeah.
I'd like an answer to the question.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
You're on a planning board, we're not gonna interfere with you guys. Mark my word.
Not according to the regulations that are proposed
No,
tonight.
well, I just mentioned that I'm very unhappy with some of these regulations. So that shows you that even though I love these people, they knew that they're trying to make it better, but unfortunately, sometimes the public say, look, you don't understand the situation, can you please understand it? We will have the attorney look into it first,
Thank you.
So-
before we even make a motion, because I will not vote for it. I spoke. In how many languages you want me to speak?
Okay, let's keep going through so we can hear what everyone has to say.
I think we should just hold on to it and review it with the attorney first, then we have another meeting.
Well, no,
I
let's
think I
get,
have
we're
a right
almost,
to say as a vice chairman,
you do.
to make sure that
But
these
we're-
people here, they go home happy,
Well-
not unhappy.
We're almost done, and
Okay.
they came
Finish.
tonight to be heard,
We
so I
make a
think we
no
let them.
motion, we'll make no acceptance until the attorney will see to it.
Let's hear what people have
And
to
you
say.
are an
get the
attorney,
input.
would you please understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Rob Houston, 20 Meeting House Road. I actually just have a question, because I'm trying to visualize this particular regulation. So Cooper Farms has a shared system.
Yes.
So under this regulation, this means that although it's a shared system, every lot that's broken up for the smaller homes and the larger homes would have to show or support an individual septic system on that lot. Is that the way is that correct?
Correct.
No, you have to show
Might as
two
well
systems
stop
on each lot.
No.
A primary and a reserve,
Yes.
10 feet apart from each other.
Title V, yeah.
100 feet from what?
So-
the regulations.
So I'm just trying to visualize this, if I look at the layout of Cooper Farm, those lots, in particular the smaller units, the older, over 55 lots, are very small by design, on purpose, so that elderly people don't have large lots to maintain. I don't know, what this says is that couldn't be built. Is that correct?
Could be built.
it needs to, well,
No, it couldn't be built because
Yeah.
you couldn't put a septic on each one of those small lots. It's more, visually, I needed to see that, and now I understand that. Okay, thank you. That's
So,
helpful.
Doug Shaw, I got a quick question. So speaking of Cooper Farm, so if you take that 55 and older at Cooper Farm, those are not, correct me if I'm wrong, that's one lot.
One lot.
It's one lot that has 20 homes on it. How do you handle that?
Well,
It's a
they can-
4-acre parcel that has 20 homes.
Oh, so that's even
For our
different.
seniors,
mhm.
by the way, how do you handle that?
It says each lot.
Regulation 9 does appear to be on a lot basis,
Yeah.
not on a house basis, which actually may go to Ed's question
Yeah.
about whether accessories are incorporated as long as they're on the same lot.
That's- I'm still trying to visualize it, so that's really where I'm struggling, I'm sorry.
They want a minimum lot size.
4 acres. 200 feet away from what?
Just trying to figure out how that works in our new 55 and over bylaw.
We don't have a new 55 and older bylaw, we have a senior residential
Sorry.
development bylaw.
My language is not good, Ed, sorry.
That's okay. So just to clarify, it's not a 55 and older. it's a
Senior residential
development
bylaw, how this impacts the ability to build
So part of
those.
part of that whole proposal, one is first for the seniors, but it also is supposed to
Doesn't come
help
in front
out
of us, so we
with
don't.
providing housing for veterans, disabled, municipal employees who can't afford, who drive from Orange, Massachusetts to serve our town because they can't afford to live in it. So if we don't provide any housing for anybody on a higher income level at this point, they're never moving into our town, and they are gonna make this town exclusive. It goes against best housing practices across the board. All these regulations do is close Littleton out, we close the door on anybody that wants to move in, and we become an exclusive town with a closed door. We're not gonna be a welcoming community anymore.
Or anybody who wants to stay.
So we can't get any granite curbs like over.
All right, my question was answered, I'm sorry to
Oh, well,
cast this the wrong way. Thank you.
You want to take 20?
Sure. Regulation 20, in regards to ledge. As a portion of the town of Littleton relies on local well water supplies, particular attention shall be paid to the location of any ledge in relation to a proposed sewage disposal system. For new construction, for new construction, depth of naturally occurring pervious material above ledge must be 5 feet. Fill shall not be used to meet this requirement.
Ted, you're gonna change your seat, just.
Yeah, well, that's what I did last time, I don't know, it's all right. When you mention well, in relation to the, first, let me get to my point here, this one, the Title V says 4, now we're saying 5. So this goes back to my last argument, if 4 is good, 5 is better, it really isn't. But I think when you try to justify this with a well, you're kind of showing, I guess, how much experience you don't have in well construction and in housing construction. Wells these days are drilled through ledge, and they're sealed off at the top, so you have the overburden, which you're talking about right now, that 4 feet in naturally occurring. New wells now are drilled down into the bedrock and sealed off at the top. So there's actually no mixing immediately of those two aquifers. You're in a separate aquifer. So I think if you want to sound credible, you want to take out the whole part about the well.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
So, the idea here was that you want to have material between the ledge and the septic system so that you don't contaminate the bedrock aquifer. That was.
But you don't, they're not connected.
Well, yeah, they are connected, unless you have it impermeable. In a well, they're not connected because you seal it off, but unless you have an impermeable layer between the two of them, they are connected.
They may be connected somewhere, obviously, but this, you just said it yourself. Concerning a well and aquifer, they're not connected.
We're talking about the
so.
aquifer here.
Right, and you just said they're not connected, so
The
I'm just saying, if you want
aquifers
to.
are connected, unless there's an impermeable layer between the two of them.
But before that, I thought you said something about regarding a well and a septic system, they're not connected.
I said a well isn't, but anyway.
Okay, so
We're talking about the aquifer, so
point of the well.
just wanted to address what you just said.
Okay, so, all right, so what I'm trying to say is we wouldn't have had this argument at all if the part about the well wasn't in there. So I think putting the well in there reduces the credibility of the argument. If you want to say, just for new construction, the depth above ledge shall be naturally occurring pervious material shall be 5 feet, that's fine, you can say that. But again, because 4 feet is good, 5 feet is not better, so. Well, that's in Title V. Oh, yeah, the part about fill not being used to make that requirement, that's in Title V, so it's redundant.
Yeah.
So Regulation 21, systems partially in Littleton. Any facilities for the disposal or treatment of sanitary sewage located wholly or part in the town of Littleton shall require the approval and permit from from Littleton Board of Health prior to construction.
Has anyone looked to see how many properties this affects? I'm not getting up to discuss it, this only affects like 2 properties. Have we looked at that? Do we know how many properties it affects? Is it really even worthwhile to make those 2 or 3 people jump through an extra hoop?
I haven't looked to see how many properties.
What's that?
I haven't looked to see how many properties.
So you're enacting regulations then, but you don't know how many, all right, that's fine. I'm not, if you don't know, I think it's maybe one or two, so I'm not gonna argue. How many properties does it affect? And the answer was that.
Jim didn't really agree with it either.
Well, what was the intent there? Why even brought this up? If you don't know what the effect is, why propose a
What was the
change?
problem that brought it up?
Why propose a change in regulation if you don't even know what the effect is? That's what I thought.
I think since it was repealed in 2011, just came to the, I think since it was repealed in 2011, it just came to our attention that if a system is going to be installed in a portion of Littleton, the Board of Health should take a look at it.
Now that I can speak to. I can speak to the history of that, because
Yeah.
back in 2011, 2007, we talked about this, and I remember specifically talking about this, and it was my point, it was like, as long as they're getting a permit from Groton or whatever abutting town it is, why do we need to make them go through double permitting, double fees, double indemnity? And if, if they, I think we said, tell them to get us a copy of the permit, if they got a permit, they're good to go. Why make them jump through 2 hoops instead of 1?
That makes sense. Regulation 23. Impervious barriers, any impervious barriers such as, but not limited to, clay, polyfabric sheets, and block walls used for breakout grading purposes around soil absorption systems for new construction are not permitted. A barrier shall be no less than 10 feet to a leaching system. B, retaining walls. Retaining walls used for breakout grading purposes around soil absorption systems for new construction will not be permitted. If necessary and approved by the Littleton Board of Health, retaining walls used for upgrades of failing septic systems must be constructed of reinforced concrete or equivalent, or interlocking concrete blocks with dimensions no smaller than 18 by 24 by 20, in compliance with 310 CMR 15.255-2, subheadings A through G. A retaining wall shall be no less than 10 feet to a leaching system. C, abutter notification. Prior to approving a system incorporating a retaining wall, impervious barrier, or a variance from offset to property lines, the applicant shall notify all immediate abutters at least 10 days prior to the scheduled hearing date by certified mail and first-class postage prepaid. Definition of abutter, legal owner of properties that are contiguous to the applicant's property and directly across any right-of-way, street, path, etc. of the applicant's property. D, flagging. The footprint of the work shown on the proposed plan shall be delineated to the satisfaction of the Littleton Board of Health or its agent prior to notifying abutters. Jim's comment, will impervious barriers be allowed for upgrades? And this is just applying to new construction.
Anybody want to go first? Again, I want to circle back to, how does this meet your standards in the beginning? How does this provide any additional environmental protection? A barrier, we had a long meeting about this, about barriers and walls previously, but I want to be on the record just saying, there's no additional protection having it at 10 feet versus 5 feet, having the barrier 5 feet off from the septic system than from 10 feet. And it just increases the construction cost, and it provides no additional protection. Moving on to B, let me see. So no walls for new construction. Why is new construction that different from a repair? Basically, it is just a new house. Again, it's what everybody's talking about. It's looking like these are here to prevent developments. And then interlocking concrete block, you're speccing it. Who's to say that's the most cost-effective? Who are you guys who aren't involved in construction, as far as I know, to say that that's what's necessary? Again, a retaining wall shall be no less than 10 feet to a leaching system. I don't see a science behind it. Again, I'd like to hear from you guys on that. A butter notification. So this seems to say, correct me if I'm wrong, this is something that I've had run-ins with the board on previously, and I think it was miswritten last time it was updated. This seems to say that if I have a house and I'm putting up
a new septic system, and my wall is gonna be 50 feet from my neighbor, I still have to notify all neighbors, not just the neighbor abutting that wall, and have them come in and comment on it. Is that the way this is that the intent and the way this is written?
It says all immediate abutters.
But it also doesn't give it, okay, so when we were on the board, and we were having a lot of problems with people building septic systems right up to the property line in the lake area, it's going to happen. And we said, all right, we're having all these problems once construction starts, people come in and trying to stop the construction. So we said, okay, if there's any work done within 10 feet of somebody abutting property line, we need to ask them to be notified. It's a good idea, because then we can come into a meeting, we can iron it out, set expectations, try to meet the needs of that abutter if we can, and if not, we can at least tell them why it has to be done and why their septic system is going to be protected. So any work within 10 feet of an abutter, fill or anything like that for drainage purposes, could be recommended. But if somebody's got a 6-acre property and they're putting up a wall to hold their septic system because they don't want to chase it all the way down the hill and it doesn't affect any butters, I mean, that's something that, should be reworded. And I'd be happy to come sit down on a working session with you and talk about that. So that Part C of butter notification, I would really like to see some new wording on that, and I'm willing to work with you on that and sit down and come in anytime you ask me. As far as flagging, I would ask that you be more specific. If you want, if you want to call out specific items to be flagged, the corners of the systems, the edges of the ends of the tank, things like that, because this part about saying to the satisfaction of, looks like you say to the health agent, that's difficult, because if I go out and I say, well, the only affecting part is the septic system, and I stake out the septic system, and then health agent comes out and says, well, no, you have to stake out the tank, then I gotta go make another trip. And then what if he says, well, this looks a little close to the foundation, show me where the foundation is too. So I would just be a little more specific on that part. So I think this is about it. This is the last regulation?
No, we have one more.
One more? Okay.
If I may ask a question. Ben Long,
Yeah.
Road. With the regulations that are proposed in this number, whatever it was, would it affect any of your septic systems currently? That is my question. Would any of you be able to live in your houses if these regulations were imposed when your houses were built?
We covered that earlier.
I wasn't involved. I bought it from you, remember?
What does that have to
No,
do?
we're just-
What does that have to do with environmental protection? I mean,
Yeah, what doesn't have to do with environmental protection?
why are you asking that?
Why am I asking the question? Because it's a regulation that doesn't need to exist, is my point. There's already a regulation in place that's effective.
What?
To modify it or to change it, you can, you're just regulating zoning through your regulations. You're outside your
Well,
purview.
okay, thank you. There are other communities who have similar regulations. So I guess they're outside their purview also in the Board
Well,
of
the
Health.
chances are, if your septics were replaced in the last 8 to 10 years, then you have reserved area between the trenches, period. They didn't make you do two.
Okay.
In reality, you're only gonna dig up the existing system and you put it right back in the exact same place.
Erica?
So to have reserve area is almost moot.
Oh, I'm sorry, didn't know you were done. Didn't know you were speaking. Could you say your name back there, please?
Peter Scott, Scott Road.
Thank you.
A lot of redundancy.
Eric Osborne, Fox Lane. When I hear people saying, well, your house wouldn't be built, your house wouldn't be built, it's not really the point of the regulations. The point, there's a lot of regulations out there that change over time, that we determine that, for environmental reasons, there needs to be a change. And maybe something that was built 50 years ago wouldn't be built now. If there's a reason, and I accept that if some of these regulations need to be challenged because they're not meeting the goals, then fine. But just to say, well, we're not gonna do it because your house wouldn't have been built if we had that rule, doesn't make sense. We need to be looking at the environmental costs and see if we can.
So if that's your feeling, then the grandfather clause should be put in for all small lots that are already delineated that aren't built on as of today. So all the 40 by 80s that are down around the lake should be grandfathered under the old stuff, not the new stuff you're gonna impose today, so that the people that own those lots, that took care of them, and mowed the grass and weeded them and feeded them for all those years, so they could pass them down to their kids or whoever, sell them for whatever profit, can still do so. It's not their right to take away their right to sell that piece of property.
But it's none of our right to pollute, right? So if there are changes that need to be made to protect the environment, then we need to make those changes. I'm not saying that necessarily every one of these is the right
So I would agree
statute
with
to be
you.
making.
I would agree with
but-
you, but I do think when you do start taking away people's rights, you need to do a very good job at justifying those changes, and I don't think that's been done.
And reimburse them for their losses that they will incur.
I mean, some of these people paid
Once
property
again-
taxes on lots for a lot of years.
Through the chair, if I may. These regulations, I mean, what's being proposed is reverting back to regulations largely that have only been repealed a handful of years ago. So your argument that people have owned these lots for 50 years, it really loses all of its thrust, because it was only 6 years ago that these regulations that.
But what we're saying is the Board of
Hold
Health,
back.
6 years ago, or 10 years ago, was doing a better job at protecting people's rights.
Not
Understood.
protecting, not
Balancing.
balancing, yeah, but not
Balancing.
infringing on people's rights.
Understood, but the argument that, the Board of Health or the town should somehow compensate these people who may lose this ability, those folks weren't compensating the town when they all of a sudden came into lots that were now developable as of 2011. You know, this is the ebb and flow of things, and this is the nature of the process.
However, when they bought these lots 50 years ago, they were under the assumption they could be developed. That's why they were split into lots.
Well, that's the nature of zoning in any regulation, and you do lose some value to your property. My issue here is I don't think it's been justified. Zoning does the same thing.
Chuck?
Chuck Coast, 69 Newtown Road. You made some references tonight about other towns that are doing this. Just from a research standpoint for the general public, if you could put together a work piece that maybe shows what some of the justifications are. There's been a lot of questions asked tonight. Something like that, like the matrix that you have put together already with some additional research that we can do on our own based upon some direction from the research that the board
that's a good
has done,
idea.
that would be helpful to us.
Yeah. Joyce?
If you're looking at amending this matrix, which is useful, and amending it with comparators, I think a comparator, or not a comparator, a description of each regulation's nexus to the initial justification would be very, very important here, because as much as I'm interested in some of them, I think there is no nexus. between others.
But wait a minute, your opening statement says Littleton is unique, and that's the justification for all these. Why are we going back and looking at other towns and saying, well, other towns do that, so Littleton do this, but now Littleton is so unique? And I'm talking, because I'm not at the mic, but right, I mean, that's what we're saying. Is there a response to that? I mean, right here, Littleton is unique. Other towns do it. I mean, that's hypocrisy.
Well, it's an
If I get my
interesting
better-
argument where you
Right,
say
but-
Acton and.
But it also goes back to, we've heard the argument 1,000 times. Well, if your friend jumps off a cliff, are you gonna jump off the cliff? So there's my two problems with it. Just because another town does it, doesn't mean it's right. And that it doesn't match up with your justification for the.
They're in the
home
same
regulations.
physiography as
What's
us.
that?
They're in the same physiography.
Well, I'll add to that,
But then
though. So
put that in
Acton
there.
and Stowe both have similar regulations. Foxborough, Harvard, Air, Westford, there's more towns that don't.
Well, on some of them,
Acton
but
has a
you're
lot
right,
of
we
standard
need to
sewer
put it,
system, and even the four that don't.
Did you have a,
they do, so-
Mr. Glavy?
Yeah, I would just, can't fault Lady 54 Lewiston Road, somewhat repetitive to comments made earlier, but I think it's individually, every one of these proposed regulations, since they do impact everybody's property rights potentially, the burden is to make a case for each one of them individually, and I don't think that's been done in any of these cases, except for the generic statement that, well, if they all restrict development, then they therefore are by nature protective of the environment. I think that goes way off off the reservation from the Board of Health purview. In each case, there ought to be a documented problem with challenges to the groundwater that you're seeking to address. And I haven't, in each individual proposed change, haven't heard that case made, other than just let's roll back, time and get rid of all the changes that were made in 2011.
Through the chair, Peter Scott, why don't we just go out and see how many properties down by all the wetlands and the lakes and stuff haven't had a new septic design or an upgrade in the last 25 years, and have them all fix theirs. That way, reduce all the effluent running into the lake.
Actually, the Board of Health did an analysis around Long Lake in that neighborhood, and there are numbers out there, they're a few years old now, about how old the septic system is.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot better.
What do you suppose the ages? There's some out there that are 50 years old, right? Right. Think they're operating properly?
Yeah.
But now they won't be able to fix them, so what will happen to their homes?
No,
So they won't be able to fix
it's not for upgrade, it's new construction.
all new.
Let's see.
So we should just address the new construction people, not the ones that are putting all the influence into the lake.
I think you want to make a.
No, you're
big
saying net, net
on the sewer
improvement,
system down
that's a good
Goldsmith,
point.
on the new
Excuse me?
proposed sewer system. You want to make a big difference on the sewer system down Goldsmith, not just King Street, where there's 150 houses. Go down Goldsmith, it was 400. That's a better solution to all of these problems.
Well, we've got people from the Board of Selectmen here. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, he's hiding.
Speak to the sewer.
Maybe I'm wrong, this is about 50 that are actually.
I'm happy to speak to the sewer and what we're.
Well, if you guys can talk about sewer, but if you're done with regulations, I'm out of here. I don't want to.
All right, we have one more. I'll just read it and get it over with. Any building sewer greater than 100 feet shall have cleanouts at every 50-foot interval.
Before the septic tank might be useful, after the septic tank, useless.
Useless? Okay, thank you very much for all your comments. We appreciate your input and your time. And we are going to continue.
October 23rd at 8 p.m.
8 p.m.?
October 23rd.
October 23rd,
Need to make a motion.
8 p.m. Do we have a motion to continue this review of regulations to October 23rd at 8 p.m.?
I'll make a motion to continue it till October 23rd at 8 p.m.
Anybody want a second? All in favor? Aye. We're continuing.
Aye.
All against? Continue. 8.
Can we do early?
8 p.m. on October 23rd.
Could we do it at 7? Yeah, she's already got stuff booked. 8 o'clock. What?
Oh. My favorite pen.
Why did you get that out of
That's her new toy. She's marking. I thought you were talking about my glowing personality.
I am freezing. I am so cold. I'm shaking. No, it is. It's so cold. Okay, next on the agenda is I gave you my agenda. I thought I had 2:30. We have a public hearing continued, 24 Long Lake Road, Barbara O'Dowd.
See you tomorrow, right?
Okay.
Make sure we all have an agenda.
You need a table? You want us to?
You don't have one?
No.
Does this table have wheels?
You have it now? You don't have it. Then everybody should have the agenda, not only one person.
Everybody did.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, it was on the top of every packet.
Tom, I don't have it. You guys don't
Right
like
here.
it? No, this is yours.
I'm sure you,
I took them.
here, I took yours. You have that.
We didn't have this
Thank you.
plan in our email, did we?
I did not receive it.
Can you get these to connect to the speakers next time?
Talk to the fire chief.
Take it easy, stranger.
Okay, my name's Doug Smith. Here, this was continued from 2 weeks ago. And the three items that were, needed to be done was, number one, mark all the trees on the property, ones that are stained, ones that need to be cut, et cetera. I can look this up a little bit. So this is the 10 scale, so it show up a little bit better. But on this boundary is a whole row of trees. And I also have a picture I can show you of it. And that's right on the boundary, so they'll be stained.
Could you flatten that thing? Thank you.
And on the other side, we had an abutter talk last meeting about some trees that they were concerned with. Most of those are actually on her own property that overlap her house. I'll show you some pictures.
Those trees you're talking about.
Yes, trees, every one of these
It
symbols.
looks like it is on the other side of the property.
Exactly, yep. And then what they'll have to cut on their own property, there's a big one, well, there's a 50-inch oak right here.
Yeah.
Very big roots and everything. That has to be cut. There's an 8-inch maple, 16-inch pine, and then there's 2 or 3 overlapping the back boundary.
That is
So,
on your property, right?
most of those are off. So these can't be touched. This group has to be cut, and that's really it. And as far as the dialogue that was going on from the abutter, I mean, the work on this septic doesn't affect her land whatsoever on the
So you
trees.
don't need a wall, you don't need no swell or nothing, right?
Well, no, the second item was to put a swale in. And when I went back to pinpoint all these trees,
Yeah.
originally I had a swale going down this way, but then I realized it's totally impossible to build it that direction.
Because the trees.
Yeah, you've got all these trees here, you've got a shed, pavement right in here, and plus another big tree, a 48-inch oak. And the way the ground is sloping, the direction of it, it won't work. So what I propose now is a swale going this way, and to put in 4 infiltrators, 4 plastic
At the end,
infiltrators
right there.
with some stone around it. And I have a detail of the plan right here for the actual ditch and then for the infiltrators. And so that will take care of any water heading that direction. This swale will take the water and it will flow right there. There's an open area right here where there's no trees. It's low compared to everything else.
So you can guarantee that the water doesn't go on the other side?
Yeah, that won't work, exactly.
Are
Yep.
you the abutter?
My wife is.
Okay.
No, he's not the owner.
Now, his wife owns this house here.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm an old man, Gino.
No, you're not
We
that
have 2
old.
abutters here tonight.
Okay.
I'm 26.
You have any problem as a butter? You have any problem?
Just the trees. I mean,
But
because,
as he mentioned, those trees are in somebody else's land.
They're in your, they say they're in
her land.
he's saying they're on my property, but I'm not the one doing digging. They're gonna be digging up in their backyard.
Well, excuse me, sir.
I'd like to show her.
When you're gonna dig, how far are you gonna dig away from the tree? Can you do that?
The very closest is this one tree here, and that's the one that has the nail in it for the benchmark. That's close, but
That's in
all
your-
these are not even.
because I can't see from back there.
Sure. Okay, here's the, if you're looking in your property, this is your house
Yeah,
here.
this is me.
These trees, most of these are on your land. This one's right on the boundary.
Right, but
Some of them overlap.
the roots to those go all the way well into her yard. Because I got roots coming all the way across my driveway, you know, lifting the driveway. So when you go to dig,
all of this, these are the two, this is the benchmark, and then
Yes.
there's this one.
This is probably the only one you'd probably
And
have to
that
worry
one.
about.
And that one, that's the one that I'm most worried about, because you're digging all the way over. These two.
Yeah, see, this is the limit of digging here. And, you know, that's on your, it's right on the line.
You've got to sever the roots, though, and that's my problem.
So, I talked to Jim Greffy about
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
And he said that, if he sees them going into roots, because the issue is safety, and we're not used to dealing with safety here on the trees. So, he said that if he sees them going into something, he'll make sure that they take it out in the right way.
They'll take up.
But, I mean, if they hit a root, because you're talking about them hitting the root, they could slice the root out, I think, and still,
And then fill it.
yeah, and just fill it back up.
That's not all that's not in line with the research that I've done about when you disrupt the entire
Well,
root system of a
If
tree
it-
that
If
size.
they're digging, it's gonna be, how much away when you're digging, can you just have enough room? Because even if there is a problem there, if the digging will be a temporary, then they're gonna fill around the way with dirt, so.
Yeah, but
It's
don't
not
they
gonna
have to?
damage the
They have
tree.
to dig, they
You
have
know
to
what I'm saying?
dig everything out to get the leach field in.
Well,
That's what my understanding is. When you
Yeah, but
put a
it-
system in and you lay all the pipe
It's on their
and-
property, so they can do that. It's just a matter of
Here's a
making
picture
sure
here.
that there's, safety.
The tree with the ribbon is the
Yeah.
benchmark. The
Yeah.
other one is the one she's concerned with. That is so far away from where this septic system is being built, which
Okay.
is so much upslope of all that. What
So in
what
other-
she's
when you're digging-
complaining is not even a concern.
I'm not complaining, I'm legitimately concerned.
But
This
it's-
is not, I'm not here to
So
whine, I'm
does the
here to.
elevation of the property change where that
Yes,
tree is?
there's like 3 or 4 contours from the elevation where the septic's going to down here. It's way lower. It's like 6 feet
But
lower.
where the tree is it stayed
That's-
the same?
That's on the low part, so.
This- on that side.
So I can't see how this at all is gonna affect that tree.
What about your swale that you need to put in?
That's only a foot deep.
1 foot deep?
Yeah, just starting off. So it's not
To make
much.
sure that
It's
the water
just
don't
enough
go-
to take any water that travels that direction and not put it in your land and have it go to this seepage. Infiltrate or stormwater. So no water will go on your property. That's what that's for, but it's not deep. It's just enough to take water that's flowing over the ground.
And then where,
area
where,
away.
do you show markings of what trees that you have to take down? Because
Yeah.
these are all big too,
Yeah,
back
it's all
here.
these, that's a 48-inch tree.
So
50 inch.
which ones are getting cut down? Because it's
This,
like,
this,
And that
that,
one.
these 4,
Yeah.
these are off the land. so
Yeah,
they
that's-
really
I know
can't.
her.
That's on
She's
the other
my-
side of the boundary. So basically 4 trees, one
Okay.
extremely big one.
I was
and
I was
3
back
2
there
to 3
today.
mediums. They're all, it's all right here, these are that's the big one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
Yep.
an 8-inch. So those are the ones that have to be cut right there, to put the septic in.
I understand.
And they're way up high, that's, like I said, 6 feet in elevation higher than
What do you think?
her
I think
property.
there should be no problem, because when they're gonna start digging, she lives right nearby, she can look and she can.
What if
feel
I
the-
have a problem? Like,
If you
what
have a
if,
problem, if
You
you
call
have a
it Jim
problem, you tell
Gareffi.
the construction engineer, they say, explain it to me, what happened now?
Is there a way
Very
that,
simple, because I work on area like that too.
I'm,
You're so afraid that, you know.
I'm
they-
petrified of this
Yeah, I
one,
mean-
because when I look at the root system, when I did
Hey.
research, the root system of a tree this size, it's
Yeah, but you
it-
can
Yeah,
cut
but
some of those roots and it doesn't
You
bother
can
the
cut them, it's
tree.
not gonna damage the tree at all.
Yeah.
It's not gonna cut too much, it's going, if there is a problem, just a little bit, but then the dirt will be put back there and everything will be all right. You cut-
I don't see how trees' roots in this elevation are gonna be affected by the elevation of the septic, which is so much higher. It's, some of the fill would overlap some of it, but they're not gonna cut the roots anyways.
Right,
Well,
right,
this one
okay.
here, just, like I said, I'm not here to like
No, you
be
can sue.
outrageously unreasonable.
Or the health
But-
agent will be on site part of the time, so you can get his,
Well,
you
that's
can
what I was
call
wondering.
Janet, and she'll get in touch with Jim Graffi, right, Janet?
Is there a
And
way
through
that
the
they
Board of
can-
Health.
Is there a way that they can coordinate having Jim there when some of the digging is being done?
Yeah.
This is a new site, I don't know if you read this, let me read it, just the bottom
Oh,
part.
yeah. Can you read the
new-
whole thing?
No, just this one here is the more important, everything else forget about it. The new plan by the design include a singular green system, essentially in a rear septic tank. To reduce the water strength, a site modification to address the potential for the surface water moving into the abutting lot, right? The treatment system is in a plastic tank, and it will be recommended the installation of an anchoring strap to ensure the tank won't move at all, okay? And for the tank indicated one, but the margin of the safety is small. With the modification made to the plan, I don't have any issue with the request. So our agent has no problem.
With
With the tank, but
with-
the abutters
that's-
are concerned
That's
about
related
the
to the
trees.
tank.
Yeah,
tank.
that's.
Or the
that's
tank's
practical.
way on the other
So
side.
you can, you
I know
can
about
call
it.
and find out when Jim's gonna be on site.
Yeah, that would be
And then
great.
he'll go
He
over it.
looked
Janet,
everything,
that's
I mean,
right, right?
Yeah, not,
That's
the
pretty much what
tanks are
Jim
way
told
over
me.
the
I know,
other
but-
side. I know the size of a leach field,
Okay.
because mine was already done.
Okay. so
And it's like, you basically digging up the entire yard.
So you can
to-
call the board, can you call the Board of Health? And he'll be out there.
So it's Jim.
Make sure they,
Gareffi.
make sure they have,
Well, actually, you're gonna,
problem.
does it go through you, Janet, or straight to Jim?
sometimes the machine goes out a little
How
while.
you
to
spell his
keep
last
an eye.
name? Garaf.
That way we have no problem.
GARREFFI,
EFFI.
978.
All right, he's the health agent.
Yeah.
Do you want the number, 978?
Yeah, he might be able to put me at ease, but
Yeah.
again,
She's
once,
giving you the number.
978,
772-3335.
all right. And then the only problem is like, if it really is significant, at that point, they're already in there digging, and who's gonna go cutting a tree down,
Well,
It's
the
like,
Could I
Tell
make a
them.
comment here?
Go ahead,
I can understand Donna's
concern.
concern,
Yeah.
but God almighty, my wife has the right to have this built so that she can sell the home.
Right,
If we're gonna fight over a couple of roots in the ground that's on our property, what do we, we're both just,
No,
Gino, we're just,
everything be okay, not to worry about it,
geez.
not to.
I'm
she's
not
concerned.
actually putting a stop to anything, I just wanna make sure that there's no.
So we,
And
I
I
found
so
tree-
you should,
Tree,
Donna, but
tree falling on my house a
No,
year
I
down the
don't think
road.
it's going to fall.
well, it sounds like
We
we
have
have
another-
we concluded that though, right? So you're gonna get in
Well,
touch with
according
Jim.
to you all.
That's
But-
why I
This
pinpointed
is not-
exactly where these are.
I don't think there's a lot
This-
more we can do, is there?
We also have an abutter, another abutter that wants to.
Yeah.
State your name.
Well,
Yeah, Jackie Jeffrey.
he didn't go through the whole thing.
And I just have the trees on the other side.
Oh, you're on this side,
the-
okay.
Yeah.
The property.
Oh, no, I'm sorry,
I'm
this
on
side.
this side with
Yeah.
all the trees.
Yeah.
And the great, big
I believe I'm
tall
bigger than
trees.
that, I have a couple
But-
bigger like that.
Yeah,
myself.
and what I'm concerned about is I measured from the side of the house to the trees, and it ends up being like 11 feet 4 inches and 12 feet 8 inches and stuff. And I just see the closeness of her house to the trees, and Mr. Smith said that's how they're going in and out, is next to the house and next to the trees.
Yeah, I
There's
have the
enough
same,
room?
I thought it
same
was on the
picture.
other side.
Yeah,
The trees are on the other side of the
yeah,
fence.
and there's enough room to get through it.
Well, it's 11,
Yeah.
between the tree and Barbara's house is 11 feet 4 inches.
It's 14 feet, excuse me.
I had the tape measure sticking out straight, touching the house, and right on top of the picket fence and right to the tree. And
Why
one
were
of-
you
You know what,
touching
it's
Barbara's
really,
house?
I think people need to
With
sit
the tape
down.
measure.
Need to,
I
everybody.
decided-
Sit down, sit down.
No, I'm sorry, it's my fault, but if you, no, you can sit
down,
sit
too.
at the table with your agent. Are you the owner?
My wife is the owner.
Okay,
of-
so
of
you're,
24.
and then if you could just sit down, I'm sorry.
That's
It was,
okay.
Do you want to go back and make sure that we've finished?
Yeah, if we can just get through the design.
Okay,
first,
yeah,
that
let
would
me
be
talk about the treatment, because we haven't even done that yet. So that was the third thing last week, the probably most important thing is Jim had recommended treatment. So I went with the singular green 500 treatment tank. It's plastic, which will help get it in there because of this narrow strip between the trees and the house, which does, most of the measurements I got were close to 14 feet. It varies because of the, you know, every tree's not in a perfect line, but basically 12 and a half, 13, mostly 14 feet. It's enough room to get back there. It'll be very convenient to put that type of tank in. And Jim did mention anchoring it. I did the buoyancy calcs, and it does make it, but I changed the plan, and I have what I put on the plan, and the last two sentences to actually, as a safeguard, have some chains go over it, and they can either anchor the end of the chains each side, so they'll put a chain on the front of the plastic tank and one on the back, a galvanized chain so it won't rust. And there was two choices. They can either drill it into some of the ledge that's there, because we did hit ledge, and bolt it right in, or they could put some boulder blocks, 200 to 300 pounds on each side.
So it won't move.
Either way, it made the buoyancy calc, so this is just an extra safeguard, because when it's so close, why not be safe?
How's the ground?
It was solid. It was, 4 feet down is when we, hit that ledge flat. So, I mean,
Okay.
they can anchor it right into it.
Okay.
Drill and put a bolt type of thing. So, so this is a really good system. It will purify everything. It's known to be, really good.
So that's all
good
they do,
treatment.
put a system, nothing else, no modification, no new building, and no new room, no
No,
nothing? Okay.
no new, no. So it'll be the new singular tank, then the pump chamber, and then this system. So basically, everything's the same except for those three items.
Trying to be there when they do the digging, appreciate if you.
I'll be there, yeah. Yeah.
That way we have no.
See the
problem.
bed
We're going to
bottom
read
and-
Jim's. Have you gone through the whole design? Is there anything
Yes,
else you
yeah,
want? Okay.
and Jim has seen it. I emailed it to both her desk and Jim's, but
Janet.
it didn't open at Janet's for some
And
reason, I don't know. But
So we're going to
Jim
read.
got it.
We're going to read Jim's comments.
I just have a question. There's also a leach field on this too?
Yes, there
Okay.
is. Yeah, it's a stone and pipe leach field.
Because last time he was just talking, is this tank the treatment system that he talked about last time?
Yes, he previously had a standard septic tank and then the pump chamber, and because of the conditions, Jim recommended having the treatment. So now it's one of those treatment tanks that purifies everything, has 3 compartments in it with media and pumps, and when it comes out, it's clear liquid as opposed to a gray effluent. So it's very proven treatment device.
Yeah, got it.
All right, so I'm going to read Jim Greffy's notes on 24 Long Lake Road. Septic system for this site is in the high ground water table and therefore will be considered in failure of Title V. Soil testing was conducted and plans drawn for the replacement of the system. The site has a number of restrictions which make it difficult to design a septic system in full compliance with Title V and your local regulations: sloping site, high seasonal water table, shallow depths to ledge, and very limited lot size. The proposed design would require approval for the use less than 4 feet of pervious soil, 25 inches, and the use of a barrier around most of the system. Title V allows Board of Health to reduce the pervious soil requirements by up to 2 feet. A minimum of 2 feet of pervious soil is required. The leaching area as proposed will be 4 feet above the high groundwater. The new plan by the designer includes a singular green system, essentially an aerated septic tank, to reduce the wastewater strength, and site modifications to address the potential for surface water moving onto the abutting lot. The treatment system is in a plastic tank, and I would recommend the installation of anchoring straps to ensure the tank won't move. Buoyancy calculations for the tank indicate that it won't, but the margin of safety is small. With the modifications made, I do not have an issue with this request.
So are there any other butters who'd like to speak?
I don't think so.
Well, she has a concern about her.
Issue with the distance between the trees and the house, and I'm concerned about the trucks and that are gonna be going in and out for taking down trees, putting in fill, digging out the septic system and everything. And I get 11-6, 12-3, 12-8 going through there. And that's house to the tree. How are these ever gonna fit in without banging on the trees? You know,
So
constantly.
she wants to know if you have enough room
There's six,
on the,
yeah.
on that side of the house, leaving those trees that are on her property.
No, they're on
No.
that property, but it's
Okay.
right, they're right on the property line, but do they have enough room because they're so
To
tall,
get
they're
all,
70,
to get all the
80 feet
equipment
tall.
back there.
Yeah, they're gonna have, they're not gonna be able to bring big dump trucks in to do this project. The plastic tank is a help. The pump chamber, that won't be that bad to come in. That can come in two pieces, the bottom half, top half. And they're not gonna be driving big dump trucks back here. They could do a small one, like a 6-wheel type dump truck. Or loaders to make several trips. It's not gonna be an easy job to get all the material back there, but
So but that's
it can
something
be
that you've
done.
considered.
Oh, yeah,
the
we
space
all
and
looked
the
into
equipment
it.
trying to get back there.
And it's the only way back. You can't do it on the other side. There's a shed and
Somebody
other
wants-
constraints that.
You have a, did you want to speak?
Having been on site when the engineer...
Could you say your name, please?
I'm sorry, Gil Willett. I'm the seller's agent.
Okay.
For Barbara. Having been on site when they did the perk test, both Jim, Doug, myself were there. They had the small excavator go in and out. And in talking to the contractor, he was gonna use more of a smaller dump truck to be able to facilitate the material going in and out.
That's
So
good.
therefore, the width that was there, which was about 13, 14 feet.
Is enough.
When Doug measured it out, even if it's 11 or 12, it's gonna be plenty of space to be able to run the equipment back and forth.
Okay.
Without hitting the house or taking down a tree.
Okay.
My concern is just those big, big, tall trees that look coming over my way and wiped out. I thought that would be a safety concern.
And they've taken that into consideration, the space, by using smaller equipment.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna take whoever installs it a longer period of time than a standard job because of it.
Yep.
But it can be done.
Are you a butters by chance? No.
We're trying to buy the house.
Oh, okay.
We're trying to stay within budget. You guys make it really hard for young people to come in to a small town to grow their family, to buy these small houses when you put such hard requirements of the cost of.
Well, it's the state.
And you wouldn't want to buy a house with a bad septic system to get the
No.
bill
No.
5 years down the line.
I trust the designer that brought it here last time, that, you know, I trust my septic people.
The main thing is that the lot is so small, it's, you know, makes it a harder job. I think it's 75 by 100,
Yeah.
something like that.
Exactly.
You guys want to make a motion?
Yeah, make a motion.
I'll make a
Somebody
motion.
make a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the new plan for 24 Long Lake Road with the new design and the
second.
straps,
Yeah. That's all you need.
and the straps that Jim recommended.
Make sure that thing is stamped. You got a stamp on that thing?
Yes, I do, yeah. The stamps on it. And I've got 2 copies I can leave. and,
So does it say the date of that thing, the stamp?
Yes, it's got October 5th.
Okay, mention about the
The
date.
new design revised and dated October 5th, 2018.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then the abutters should get in touch with Jim and then have him walk you through it.
Well, just out of curiosity, what are my options? You know, because everything's approved, it's gonna get started, what are my options?
You should talk to Jim about it.
Yeah, people will just, I mean, even if I had to absorb some of the costs of that one particular tree that's bothering me, I just really believe, like, oak roots go hundreds of miles, like, one of the trees that's going right under my driveway and the whole driveway's coming out, that's a tree that's on the property line, so, you know, it's like, I know where the roots go, and I just wanna know what my options are.
What I would
with
do is
this.
speak with the tree contractor that's gonna take down the rest of the trees.
Yeah.
And maybe you
That's a
folks
good
can
idea.
work with her to throw that tree in, should the roots become affected as
Yeah,
they're
'cause
digging
they
out the
make
system.
money off the lumber, and I honestly,
Pass this to Janet.
I just want it out of here, because it's petrifying, the size of it.
He gave it to
And
Yeah, I mean,
So
it would
Janet
cost a
has
penny
it.
now to do it, whereas it'd be $100 later.
Exactly,
so.
exactly.
You work on it, okay? You can keep an eye on it, and he will,
Yeah, I mean, I want
so you can,
all-
so you can see with your eyes, okay?
What's that?
So you can see with your eyes.
Yes,
Okay, so we have administrative matters yet, next.
Can I
Thank
ask
you.
one last question?
So we closed the hearing.
Well, that's all right. It can be after the
That's
fact.
okay, okay.
The process from now with it being accepted, permits need to be issued, is that correct?
You have permits to sign tonight?
So does that go to Littleton and then Neshoba for two individual permits? to be-
Do we have it here?
Yes, I have it.
Yep.
So he can
We
walk with
can
it?
sign it tonight.
You got any?
Did Jim
No,
sign
he
it?
has to come in and pay for it.
Okay.
Well, you,
We'll sign it, you have to
You
pay
have to
for
go
it.
pay for it.
make sure you bring it tomorrow. Bring it tomorrow, the money, so he can give you the, I'll be there signing it, I don't know. You, can you
You
be?
can sign it tonight.
You have it? We'll have it, okay, we'll have it.
How much is it?
It's, I think about
So we're
100
gonna
and something.
move on to administrative matters. Minutes, 9:11 and 9:25.
Did you know there was so many?
I didn't see the minutes.
Good luck.
Good
Okay,
luck,
so we're-
man.
So, but that's just me.
It's over
Yeah,
there.
but can you approve them quick or no?
I didn't see that.
Oh, she sent them out,
Not tonight,
like
tomorrow.
a week ago.
At least we can tell them that they look. If there's any question, they can say, hey,
It's closed, it's closed.
I had some comments. Meeting minutes, has everybody had a chance to review them?
I think I have, but I don't remember them.
tell it through, I don't have a chance to read it.
Okay,
Can we do it next time?
we're gonna have to bump them. Janet, you're doing a really good job getting them to us, and we are not doing a good job getting back to you. So we need to do better on that, and when she emails them out, we need to get back to her within a couple of days, okay? It doesn't take that long to just read through them. And I believe that I can share my comments with you. Don't look at them as you pass them down.
I won't. Upside down.
Next on the agenda, where did Lisa go? Is board member reports. Does anyone have a report?
I do. So when I get to pay for the permit, what do I do? Do I come back here?
No, you'll go to the town hall.
Anyone have any reports? All right.
I went to the quarterly Neshoba Board of Health meeting last week or 2 weeks ago and learned a lot about the nursing service and hospice they provide.
Oh.
It's actually,
Hey, can you guys listen? We're having a board report.
Make sure that you have the standard.
Excuse me.
Can you go outside? We're trying to continue our meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
so I attended the quarterly meeting for the Neshoba Board of Health at the Neshoba office, at the AIR office, and they went over some financial reports and financial statements, and it was just very eye-opening to learn everything they do for us in the hospice and healthcare world. And I can pass around some of these documents that they let us take.
Thank you. Anybody else have a board member report?
No?
Do we have any correspondence?
You have any correspondence?
I am so cold. I can't even tell you. I'm shaking for an hour.
You be
She's
sure?
awake.
Freezing.
Oh, this is,
Okay, what are we doing? What is
I'm
that?
just gonna read these minutes, so when we're
Okay,
ready.
this is
We have to read the minutes and get them back to Janet, and she's gonna send them out right away, and we need to turn them around in 2 days.
Okay.
That way we'll just do it, and just send your comments back to Janet.
Yeah, yeah.
Here, could you pass that
And
back
we
down?
can comment back to you And that's it?
Yeah.
And I'll bring them, and then another check.
Oh, okay.
But we're not doing our jobs. She's doing hers and we're not doing ours.
What the hell is that? Inside this. Why did you give me all those things?
I was trying to spread them out so everybody was signing.
Yeah, why don't you give some of the person around, give it to him so they can sign it.
How many signatures do you need? You only need 3 on these, right? You need a quorum. This is just one.
Everybody's
Oh, it's
here,
just
right?
K. What's our regulation 27?
This is block 33. Holy mackerel. 15 lots.
Thank you, Jane.
On the K property, we've got one with a variance here, but I don't think we had a hearing on it.
Which
I
one
think it
is
was just a discussion.
Which one is it?
K?
I've got K also.
I thought that was a discussion.
It was.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a hearing, so we can't do this yet, right?
They don't sign it then.
Jim just handed them.
So Littleton, variance to Littleton
Jimmy
Board
says
of
all set?
Health, regulation number 27
Jimmy said
granted.
it was all set.
Yeah, but we didn't,
They would come here eventually, and then we give them.
no, but we can't sign something that we didn't have a hearing on.
Send it back.
Is-
They said Jimmy said
Does anyone have
okay.
the agenda for last week?
I'm reading the minutes right now, and
Oh,
it says
what's the
discussion.
K property? Is it a discussion?
Discussion.
Yeah, so there was no hearing.
This is Foster. Look at this one.
So none of the Ks can get
Oh, none
done.
of the
K
Ks?
State.
We
Oh,
can't,
no.
we can't grant a variance without having a hearing. We didn't have a hearing yet.
Whoops.
How many you got? One?
There's 2, 3.
Okay, 3. Oh, jeez.
If they're signed, you better, like, cross them off or
No,
something.
that's okay.
Oh, Jim signed them,
It's only, it's
okay.
only one. Jim signed it.
If I'm wrong, just let us know. I think you can,
I
it's a
already-
point of reference, but I don't,
This one here.
it's not
is,
like him to make a
Bruce.
mistake like that, so it's probably on my side.
Right, it may be
But
a
I-
different
But I don't get it, so.
lot number than the one you're talking
But I
about.
don't think we've had any on the K property. I don't think we've had any hearings.
Why would Jimmy say yes to
Does
sign?
anybody remember differently?
They come forward, they said they,
There's some that you don't come forward, that you just asked.
No, the variances we have to approve. It says we approved it, and we had a discussion that night.
Give it to him. Tell him to keep
Did
it
you
in
sign this
file.
one?
Keep it in file.
Long Lake,
Okay.
that's Long Lake.
Oops.
Oh, this is,
Same thing.
let's see.
24?
Let's see, lot A.
Oh, there's a.
This is
okay.
what Sean was talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
You got 3 of them here. We have to do it before we close out tonight.
okay, well, I'm reading the minutes. So
Well, we put that off. Well, nobody had read them.
I was in the bathroom when I
Oh, sorry.
decided that, so.
This 44 roofs like the same thing. For the lots.
Remember I emailed you a couple of weeks ago about signing up for this conference? And
Yeah,
you, and
nice
Shelley
room, huh?
had said that I can do it myself, Roy did sign up to myself for the conference she was talking about, but I was talking about the other one. This one.
Yeah, how many signatures do we need? Don't we just need, yeah, we don't need all of them, so.
Did I give you, can I just see the first?
Do you want to look at these anyway? You don't, there's already 3 signatures on them.
This one, this is the one.
You don't have to.
Well,
Unless you want to make sure that, give it another check.
thanks.
You gonna take everything back, eh? No?
Thanks. Thanks for the help.
Well, I'm trying to help.
I see.
I like this. Where'd you get this?
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Statement? Is it?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Do you want to do that deed restriction
Uh,
policy?
Can we bump that again? Is people ready to do the deed restriction policy?
No.
Sorry.
Let's bump
You're
the
gonna-
minutes and the deed restriction.
Yeah.
So are we doing the minutes?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't
I will
realize you were.
look at them tonight or tomorrow, and I'll send my comments.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Can I just say one thing really quickly?
Yeah.
Mr. Mullen mentioned that accessory apartment
Yeah.
It's a new
thing
bylaw.
that, the new bylaw that we're gonna be all voting on, so we should just figure out a deed restriction policy for that as well, because I feel like it's gonna open up a can of worms as far
No,
as,
you
you
can't,
know,
don't worry about it.
adding a bedroom and, just so we don't have to
Only-
hear all the cases.
No, the
you know?
only way they're gonna do that, if it is restrict, is gonna go through.
Hmm.
They're not gonna do anything.
Yeah, that,
5 apartments, no,
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
Okay.
No, it has to do with in-law apartments that are not gonna be occupied by family members.
Or even if they are, if they were trying to create a new bedroom, there's gotta be some language Jim can give us to, so we don't have to
They
hear
have to-
every single case that
They
comes
have
in.
to come back,
When you
in
talk
front
about
of
deed
us.
restrictions.
Right.
Yeah.
We can give their restriction later, but they have to come back in front of us.
Mhm. Or if you read this
Well-
deed restriction that they're proposing for the addition of space, something similar for the accessory.
so it's something to think
Bylaw.
about when we're looking at the deed restriction.
Well, I think we need to be,
Just to save
made,
us time.
I think we need to have somebody come in and give us a definition and go over the accessory apartment bylaw, so that we know what we're talking about before we start talking about
Yeah,
making,
that's true.
restrictions on it,
Mhm.
because we need to know what it's about.
I just know a lot of people will want to create a space for an in-law or something like that, so we just need to figure out a way to handle it with the existing septic system.
But it's not final yet, right?
No.
It's, no.
So,
I mean,
don't worry about
So I
language,
think
the
we just-
language is fine.
Don't
probably-
worry about it now.
It is?
I think they're updating the language and we're voting on it at town meeting.
Yeah, so we have, I think once it's final, then we can figure out what we're gonna do. Unless they wanna come talk to us ahead of time, which would be fine.
You never know.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, to get somebody in to explain it completely to us, so we
From
have an
the
understanding of it.
Planning board? Or Janet, can we get somebody in? Maybe it's Maren,
Whoever is in,
maybe it's Ed Mullen.
Yeah,
maybe
have Mr.
it's-
Mullen come in.
It might be the
Mr.
selectman.
Ed Mullen would be great, because he's the one that brought it up.
Yeah.
It might also be on the selectmen, since it's on the, if it's gonna be on the town meeting warrant,
Yeah.
might be a select person.
So
that's
our next
involved
meeting
with
is
that.
the 28th instead of 2 weeks from tonight?
23rd, I thought.
Oh, okay. I thought you said, never mind.
So, anything else?
I don't. I'd like to make a motion
Well,
to,
I think after all the discussion tonight, I want to go on record saying that I think that there are definitely different viewpoints that we all need to take into consideration, and I think we need some more expert panels, some more expert opinions. I think we need more information on a lot of things, because there are two sides of the story. There's the environmental protection, and there is development, and there's some legitimate concerns with people out there, so.
I agree.
I think we need a little bit more
So
information.
how are we gonna do that?
We talked, Ted offered to come in and talk to us about more in depth. I think Brad would be I don't know if Brad would be interested in coming in.
Oh, yeah, he
But
come
we
in.
can
He'll come
use
in.
his expertise. And then at some point, we might want to get a non-biased engineer.
Well, I think when you're talking about,
And these are laws, these are rules.
Yeah.
And, I hate to say it.
Yeah, like Jim said, like, don't rush it.
Yeah, I'm not a dental hygienist. I'm not comfortable with changing laws and rules in the town, the way that it's, the people that it's affecting.
yeah,
So,
Well, also what Paul Levy was saying about Bumblebee Lane was interesting.
yeah.
Because he said that they're all pretty much the same items, regulations that we're looking at. and
We
it
said
went
the
to court.
rationale was the same.
well, I don't really know what,
Do you
I'd like to
remember
know
that,
the
Gina?
history.
Well, yeah, what happened? Do you know what happened? or-
What happened, the question is, the town really got upset with the Board of Health before my time. So we
I'd
gotta
like
be
to know,
careful.
there should be some history too,
Yeah.
the Bumblebee Park, the Bumblebee development, whatever was brought up. I don't know any of the history of that.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Like Ted said, are there instances where
Yeah.
there have been problems with the way the regulations
Ted
changed?
will give you a better outlook of the situation.
And
You can
like,
ask him, he's
and
a
like
nice
Paul,
guy.
and like Paul was saying, are there some major legal ramifications to us, to the town,
Mhm,
because of these changes that we want to put forth?
mhm.
So I think we need to look at everything.
So we just have to figure out how to get that information, who to have come in. So, Ted's been in, we heard a lot from Ted tonight.
Yeah,
And
he's a
could-
good source.
Yeah, he will
But
come. he will
I
come.
think we also need to get, if we're talking about, they were on the both those people were the people who took away the regulations, so I think we
They may not be. as-
absolutely need their point of view, but we need a counterpoint too.
Mhm.
And we didn't have much of that in the room tonight. If there is one.
Yeah, but like Paul said, the water department, they should be involved, we should have a meeting with
Yeah,
them.
we should ask them, because, environmental, especially for the water, it's very important, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
You guys so intrigued about that. We should invite somebody from the water department.
Mhm.
They make you easy to understand the situation.
Yeah, and to see if.
Maybe
this-
Bob Zimmerman, that name came up.
Yeah.
He's a watershed guy, so actually, I think he would be, if we could get him, that would be a good.
But does he know specifics about the
Right,
town?
Right,
He
right.
was on the Board of Health.
Yeah,
I know, but he-
in terms of water contamination,
Right.
wells and
He'll
things like that,
he'll
will he know?
understand the issues,
He's-
yeah.
He's interested more about sewage treatment in town.
Mhm.
So let's put something aside, because that instigate, they're going from 20 million now versus before, when I ran for selectmen, to 70 million, 70 million. That was their sewage treatment. And then they minimize it, now they're talking about 20 million. See the difference? You people have to pay for it, and myself too.
People
So
that want to
let's
tie
get
in,
somebody
the
that,
people that want to
as
tie
you
in
said,
have
is
to pay
good
for
to
it.
have the attorney to come.
I think
And
I think we need a lot more
Jimmy
information.
So how are we
Garaffi.
gonna, let's
Jim
get the
Garaffi.
ball rolling though. I don't even know how to do it because we're not allowed to talk outside here.
No, we talk here now.
I'm sorry?
I think that, we already continued the public hearing, so I don't know how much of this we're supposed to be talking about.
No, that's a good
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
Well, it was just, we didn't get a chance to make any comments after the discussion, and I just wanted to.
That's good. Well put. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.